we're going to do this press conference outside of the prison for them to talk and advocate for the story. While they're visiting, like once they set foot in there, we find out the prison's like, nah, you can't do any interviews here. Now, mind you, you're in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. So I'm like, shit, I had all these media outlets coming here. Like I had a bunch of media outlets coming. We can't do it here anymore. They're meeting with this guy. They're going to be out in 30 minutes. Where the hell am I putting this press conference at? So I'm just going through my phone and I see like there's a Wawa, maybe like 5-7 minutes out, and I'm like, oh shit, they got a parking lot there. So we go to the Wawa. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Let's just do it at the Wawa, but like in the parking lot. But the parking lot has a picturesque background, so you don't actually know you're doing it in a Wawa parking lot. But exactly. So we set it up. I told everybody change the ID. I was like, yo, the address now is this area. Sent everybody to the Wawa. Once Meek and Michael came out, I was like, just come to this location.
Didier.
Get it. What's up?
What's going on, man? It's a pleasure to have you here on the podcast. We go what?
7-8 years back?
7-8 years back, man. First and foremost, I want to say congratulations. It's incredible to watch the journey of yours and how high the success that you continue to climb in this business.
Thank you.
You have one of the biggest PR agencies in the game. It's called Vital Versatility. Clients in the plethoras, and we'll talk about some of them. But
Sure.
You are a specialist when it comes to the PR game. So again, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Hell of a run that you're on.
I appreciate it, my brother. We're taking it one day at a time. So.
One day at a time, sir. So listen, the first question I want to ask is this: in 2026, what is PR in the music business?
I feel like right now PR is in a state of evolution, right? And I think it's a byproduct of what you're seeing in media. You're seeing all these layoffs. You've kind of seen the evolution of like independent journalists coming in. So I really think we're really at a really critical point, not only in just PR, but I think in media and journalism as a whole, because obviously, you know, everything is kind of intertwined. But I think now more than ever, you really need to have a well-rounded approach to your PR strategy, because audiences are so fragmented now. When I say fragmented, you're talking about there's legacy media, right? There's still an older generation that consumes their news watching ABC, NBC, reading, newspapers, reading articles. And you have a younger generation that they consume a lot of their news by just getting what they see on TikTok or Instagram, right? Maybe they're seeing it through content creators. Maybe they're seeing it through streamers. So now more than ever, you have to have a multi-pronged approach, when you're, working with the client and making sure that they're being able to tap into multiple, different verticals, different demographics. And that's obviously kind of a byproduct of just like, with streaming now, right? You're seeing what Kai Cenat, iShowSpeed, like especially from my perspective as someone that works with different entertainers and talent, is like, hey, how do you integrate some of your talent in there as well? Because that's also part of the byproduct of visibility and exposure, that back in the day, traditional television and articles kind of the only way. And now I think there's more opportunities now more than ever when you're talking about integrating content creators and streamers into that mix as well.
Well, we started to see it with, what was it that Kai Cenat did? It was called like just... Mafia-thon, when it was like a month where he was in that mansion.
Absolutely.
And all these artists were coming through there, where typically artists would be doing the traditional press, but and it's like superstars coming into where superstars, there's a bit of that argument right now where like the superstars don't want to go and do the traditional stuff anymore, but they're going and do something with the streamer. Like, you've seen that shift. Are you also a part of navigating what that looks like when it comes to saying no to legacy or yes to legacy versus the streamers?
I mean, I think it's a multi-pronged approach, but it's also dependent on what the artist wants. I always say, when you're in PR, you're in the recommendation business. You're always going to make the recommendation.
Yeah.
But there are some clients that just want to stick to a traditional demographic or new, and they want to be like, hey, I just want to do kind of more newer types of media, less kind of traditional. Some types want to do everything, right? And I think that's where it lends itself to versatile storytelling, no pun intended. But I think I'm just saying.
I like that.
But I think, it's really predicated on what the client wants. Sometimes they're like, hey, I do want to do the non-traditional route. And I think some that want to just do the traditional route, and you have to kind of like push them to go out of their comfort zone because the traditional route is all they know. And then there's some that is like, hey, just bring the opportunity to me and let's try to touch all the worlds, which is always what I think is best.
So let's break that down. What is the traditional route versus this new media, new landscape? What are the differences?
Yeah. Well, I think now, for example, like content creators are becoming a big part of kind of what we do. Like when you see, artists on like, Aki Way, for example, right? When it's like, or School of Hard Knocks, where you have the kid James interviewing, multimillionaires and billion, like that's part of the strategy now, where before it was traditionally like, okay, traditional interview, podcast, article write-up, a national television opportunity, a performance opportunity.
Podcasts would be considered traditional?
I mean, I would say even just like 5-6 years. I mean, podcasts are in a different space now, but I still feel like even 5-6 years ago, podcasts were around and they were still part of my strategy. I just think now more than ever, they've become just part of the fabric of any type of rollout, more so than traditional television. But I mean, I think if you're really trying to break it down into terms of traditional TV, like, back in the day, it was like, hey, let's do Good Morning America, CBS Mornings, let's do, New York Times and GQ. And like, those are still part of, strategies, but they can't be, the only way you do things.
And back in the day, that shit really moved the needle.
Of course.
Today, do you still find it moves the needle just as much, or?
I think it depends on the audience you're trying to reach, because again, I think any type of strategy you put together, for PR, the goal is to put the client and give them maximum visibility, maximum exposure in front of as many, new audiences as possible, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the way I see it. Now, if you have somebody who's done a lot of those traditional media, like, and has reached kind of those platforms, but now the objective for them is to reach probably a more younger audience, which is why you got to put them in like, hey, let's do some of these content creators. Let's put you in this, new space, and then kind of, see, even like On the Radar now, right? It's like On the Radar has been around for a while, but it's become such a, ingrained part of the, just the performance rollout for artists, right? And I think before, when it was just traditional television, now it's like, okay, hey, let's do it, On the Radar. Let's, do From the Porch. Like, let's do these different types of opportunities to introduce you into different audiences where different people are going to be consuming that level of content.
Who's like an artist that you've seen? I have an idea of who I think it is, but who's an artist for the clients that you work with that you've seen have been able to transition and do that really well and diversify between the traditional side and this newer landscape? Yeah,
I mean, I would like to say I think there's two, immediate ones that come to mind in two different, age brackets. One I would say is Druski, obviously. One of our clients and, of course, hilarious comedian and creator, entrepreneur. But I think with him,
that white American shit fucking has me dying to this day, bro. That shit's wild.
He's a mastermind.
You guys aren't talking beforehand about that, right? He's
a creative. Yeah, it's in the same way you work with the artist. So it's like, let them do their art, right? But then it's also like, hey, how do you amplify that and use the success of that to amplify the individual's narrative and their brand overall?
So when you see that and it goes in real time, you're probably seeing that and you're like, all right, this is funny. Now it's my time to figure out how to amplify.
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, right? It's like all these things, it's kind of using that to build the narrative. So with him, it's like he's more than just the sketches. Of course, he has his TV shows that are on YouTube. Obviously recently just, sold out his Coulda Fest tour. And I think to your earlier point, right, it's like with him, we've been working with him the last 3.5 years. And obviously he has the youth on lock, right? Yeah. But for the longest time, I would even say, mainstream America and traditional legacy media really didn't understand the creator game and didn't understand how this was the new form of comedy.
Facts.
Right? So it was for a while early on when you're telling the story, it was really like met from some people who didn't have an open mind. There were some challenges, right? Thankfully we had really, strong relationships, and obviously some people who had a lot of open minds were like early on having him on the Drew Barrymore show, Good Morning America, like some of those things that opened the doors for him that obviously he's kind of just stomped down and continued to crush it. But with him, it lends itself to being able to do the traditional media where he's still kind of educating those that maybe are still not as, fully tapped in with the creator world, and being able to show how he's built this massive business from it. And at the same time, he can still obviously crush it when it comes to the podcast, when it comes to some of the different creator platforms. Obviously, him and Kai Cenat have developed a strong rapport that they just do a lot of the streaming stuff, together, just because they're really, really, good friends. So that's kind of one example. The other one, that I mentioned is, someone like Fat Joe,
right?
Where I think he's continued to be able to kind of evolve and pivot. And, I've been, fortunate to work with Joe, 6-7 years now at this point. And it's just really been a level of trust where it's like, hey, if you really feel like this is going to move the needle and it's going to give max visibility, then let's do it. Like, we had him on the Jay Shetty podcast a couple of years ago. And I was just like, yo, this is one of the biggest ones. And I think it's an opportunity to really also showcase not only you as an entrepreneur and as everything you've done, within the industry, but just you as a human being and just how, thoughtful you are. And obviously just even, parenting, a child that has autism, and just being able to share that aspect of his story and just some of the other things that he's dealt with, and being able to show kind of just a real comprehensive part of, Joe that we all see behind the scenes, that we still want to educate the world. And he's just been adaptable, whatever his new podcast, new content creator, opportunities. Like he's always been down for it, for sure.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a little break, because if you're listening and thinking, fuck, I could really use some guidance right now, and you're serious about building your career in the music industry, I'm now offering private strategy sessions. These are fully personalized, just you and me tackling whatever you need in your career. With over 16 years of experience working with artists, managers, and brands, I can help you map out your next moves. Now, whether that's structuring your team, scaling your brand, navigating the industry, even figuring out what steps to take, whether to go to a distributor or to a record label, and figuring out what are the best deal points, I can help you with your career with where you're at. You can now book a one-on-one with me through my Calendly, and you can find the link in the description. Now let's get back to the pod.
I think the one of the most important pieces to this puzzle here is the relationship between yourself, management, and artist, or whatever the combination of the three, or if it's just an artist. Can you walk me through, like, how does someone like Fat Joe, with a legacy of 30 years in the business plus, is able to trust somebody like yourself to help guide the career in this new wave of how attention is being dispersed throughout, the public eye,
right,
in this day and age? What's that conversation like to make sure that you have somebody that can believe in what your vision is and align with their vision?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like any, relationship, business-wise, personal, whatever the case may be, that's built over time. And anytime I approach any type of new, client relationship, right now it's just about doing the work, right? Proof of concept, and showing you, again, I'm going to make a recommendation to you. I'm going to explain it. I'm going to be able to defend it. But also, with anything, like I'll politely push back if I feel like we're in a disagreement, not in like in any type of disrespectful way, just more like, hey, I really believe in this, and let me just explain to you why. Here's another way you may want to consider it, that here's the value for something. And that just goes for any client, right? I think he, obviously someone with a real open mind. And we just had very, candid conversations. And I think over time, as we both got to continue working together and, seeing what was able to move, like one thing, I know he noticed off the bat was I was just a hustler. I was trying to work. Like when we were connected, I still remember it was like, I think 2019, he brought me on maybe like 2-3 weeks before he was supposed to drop an album with Dre of Cool and Dre.
Crazy.
And it was just a tight turnaround, whereas like we needed to put a whole plan together in 2 to 3 weeks, and it was like around the holidays. So you were also like,
I remember that,
with like one hand behind your back, because holidays is also a little tougher. But we were able to put together a really strong, promo run for him, and for him to share a really powerful story. And I think once he saw my ability to execute and stay cool under pressure, but still be able to develop and deliver really kind of just strong results on a tight turnaround, I think that laid a very strong foundation for our working relationship. That then over time, as we went along, like we just developed the trust, like anything, that even sometimes if there is something, I may not agree with, I'm comfortable enough to tell him that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
either
yeah.
we'll agree or we'll agree to disagree. But I think part of it is putting people around you that are also going to challenge you to think differently. And I think sometimes there are some clients who are very open to that, of being pushed in different directions, you know, so, and that's obviously where I think the most fruitful relationships come, when you guys can be brutally honest and transparent with one another.
Yeah, 100% without feelings getting hurt. You're just trying to get to the same place, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like upgrading, getting to another level. I mean, I saw it as well too. As we mentioned, you know, we've known each other for 8 years. And the first thing that I started to see with Joe was him diversifying himself on IG Live, doing the interviews. And I mean, you called me one time, you're like, yo, would Jesse ever do? I was like, fuck yeah, what are you talking about? This is amazing.
Yeah.
And he went by the moniker Jopra and all this.
Of course.
And it was like, it was pretty incredible to see, and to see where that scaled to, where now him and Jadakiss have that podcast, which every day I get 1 or 2 clips that pop up on my IG about it. It's amazing.
Throw the flag.
Yo, Jadakiss in there is the best.
Yeah.
Joe's stories, Jada's reactions, comedy.
Absolutely.
Comedy every single
Phenomenal combination. Yeah.
Incredible combination, those two.
It's really been beautiful to watch. And that's something, obviously, you know, to his credit, right? Joe started, you know, the IG Lives, and obviously, you know, we'd help kind of just bring in with some of the talent. But I think it's also figuring out how to capitalize on that. And like, you know, we had him co-host the Drew Barrymore show at one point, which I think was, you know, really, really great, because he had already done a few episodes with him and Remy co-hosting, you know, Wendy Williams' show that we were helping, you know, execute. But then it's like, hey, let's also do it in different demographics, right? And then people being able to see that he had that footage in that reel and that range, that it's really like he can talk to anybody. And I think
for sure,
that's just kind of just the beauty of just, you know, his evolution from hosting the, you know, BET Hip Hop Awards to where he's, you know, now has just a phenomenal podcast. That's a testament to who he is, who we see again behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And just making sure we continue to amplify, lift, and protect his brand, because at the end of the day, that's the role and responsibility of a publicist.
When you start to see it at first with the IG Lives, right? And you see that it's getting traction, how I'm asking this question because I think like artists and managers need to really think about how, like, strategically, like every step of the way. There's a lot of organic that happens in this process, right? Because, you know, the way that you can't gain traction, sure, there's some strategy and some marketing and all that, but at the end of the day, if the audience isn't gravitating towards it, you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So with you guys, you know, I saw the IG Lives, at least from my perception, and I could be wrong, but it started to gain a wider audience. People started to see that Joe had this really versatile way of having conversations with people.
Right.
And I think the one thing with Joe, and I'm not speaking for another person, but from what I observe, is that he makes people feel very comfortable.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that seems to be like one of his superpowers when he has a conversation with somebody. When you see all that, how often are you guys talking to say, hey, this is looking good, I think there's a next step and here's the strategy. Can you walk me through what that was?
I mean, I think all the time. I think it's also just being able to, you know, when you're formulating the strategy, kind of like talk him or any client through what you're thinking. And I think, especially with that, I kind of saw 2 arcs to his storytelling. There's one, Joe repositioning himself as a media personality, right? So whenever I set him up for interviews, you set the bullets up so that when people are interviewing them, you give them talking points with the hopes of serving them with the information to ask the person they're interviewing, your client, questions about that, essentially kind of trying to serve it to them on a silver platter. But on the other hand, it's an entrepreneurial story as well, right? It's a business story, because it's how he's taking this concept and started to turn it into a business. When we started doing interviews about it in, you know, Business Insider and different platforms like that, that's also another avenue. Is like, even with this, obviously with your podcast, this is also an entrepreneurial endeavor. This is a business. It's a venture. Yeah. That lends itself into the storytelling, and you take that kind of piece of information, and how do I make sure I tell Joe's story? There's a lot of people who, if you look, like just taking Fat Joe as a case study, hey, let's just have him in music outlets, right? Meanwhile, I'm like, no, like sure, music outlets make sense because obviously, you know, he comes from, you know, a music background, but I'm like, let's start going for the business outlets. He should be doing Bloomberg. Let's be doing Forbes. Like, let's talk about some of, you know, those Entrepreneur magazine. And it's like, hey, we know how much he loves sports. He's interviewing all these athletes on the IG. So let's make sure we're talking to the sports outlets as well, so he can be able to kind of continue to push that narrative of these conversations he's had with Dwayne Wade and, you know, whomever, right? And Mello, whatever, and these type of platforms. So that kind of also allows you to open up how you're telling the story. Because some people just really look at PR and it's like, hey, and not just only like the publicists, but people in general just try to kind of put you in a box. All right, musician, let's just put him Billboard, Complex, Up Rocks, XYZ, and just think with that, like that kind of narrow-minded lens, where it's like, no, there's multiple opportunities to tell this. And even with Joe over the years, becoming, as I learned him more as a human being and finding out his interest in kind of just politics and what his work aligning with Power to the Patients, that allowed it, us to kind of start looking and we put him on CNN, we're going to have him on MSNBC, and like being able to then kind of, again, show his versatility as a human being and his ability to, authoritatively speak on some of these other concepts, and just kind of, even just the adjustments that are needed, in the healthcare price transparency sector, and I think that was just another way of just really showing, again, like the well-rounded approach to one individual. And those are the stories I love. When the new clients are coming to me, and if I don't feel like there's a narrative, I don't feel like there's a focus, and they just like, hey, I just want to drop this album, I just want to do this, I don't really only care about music, that's fine, of course, and you can do that. Maybe that's a 3 to 4 month project and you keep it moving.
Yeah.
But what I really appreciate, with people that we work with from the, Meg Thee Stallions to the E40s to the, the Fat Joes, to the Druskis, these are entrepreneurs. And you can tell even with E40, like with his wine and liquor and food empire, there's so much that you can tell, on that side of his narrative, to a business sector. Like I think for him, like, putting him on like a CNBC, like I think those things are huge. We had him on Bloomberg. So it's just like these things where it's like when you look at it and take a step back, the opportunities for storytelling are endless. You just got to make sure you do the effort and do the legwork to get to know your client, to be able to figure out what are the opportunities, what are the stories they want to tell, and how you can creatively tell them.
So you talk a lot about storytelling, and that's an important piece of this whole, the PR game. And I know a lot of that is also framed through your time as a journalist.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about that, because you were also a beat writer for the Boston Red Sox. You were really young. You were an intern when LeBron was in Miami, when the Heat were, the Heatles.
Yeah, man.
Not 1, not 2, not 3.
Yeah.
Turned out to only be a couple.
We're pretty much going down, like when I was a sophomore in high school at the time, I knew I wanted to be a sports journalist. I was like addicted to watching ESPN. Like I would watch it all the time, really. So I I obviously saw like the lack of Latino representation in that sector as well, right? So I also really wanted to kind of just come in, and I went to Syracuse University. Shout out Syracuse Orange, by the way, all the love. But obviously, #1 communication school in the nation at that time. So I was in there.
Ariel went to Syracuse for journalism as well too. Yeah. I just heard that today.
Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, absolutely. I'm not exaggerating. I'm a truth teller.
I heard the same thing, and it's a real thing.
For sure. So it really opened up a lot of doors for me, where I had high-profile internships at MLB.com covering the Yankees and the Mets. I was Miami Herald, like the summer LeBron came to the Heat. If you look back at those old pictures and one of his first official press conferences, you see me with Israel Gutierrez from the Miami Herald at that time in the front row. I had a really bad hairline at the time, but it's a story for another day. But yes, but then that kind of opened up the doors where then I did, I was at the Houston Chronicle for a year. I was at New England Sports Network, where I covered the Boston Red Sox, did some on-air work. And, that's really where I've always had a love for storytelling. I think I pivoted out of journalism because I kind of saw the direction journalism was headed that long ago, when I saw kind of just the lack of prioritization on like reporting, and more just the kind of the pivot to page views and
salacious kind of clickbait shit.
I wouldn't even say salacious, just more aggregation. Like if you break a story, then the outlet would want me to rewrite your stuff instead of just working to like advance the story or just take it to a different level. And once I realized, that was kind of why I started falling out of love with journalism, and I knew I had to make a pivot. And that's where, I went to PR. I actually started off doing tech PR for the first, 3.5 years. And I had no interest in tech. I just needed to get experience because I was changing careers. But what I tell people now is I wouldn't be where I'm at now without the foundation of my journalism career. Because at the end of the day, I'm still a storyteller, right? In the same way that as a writer, I would pitch my editor story ideas and they let me execute it. In many ways, now I'm pitching the media about my clients and coming up with ideas and visions for them to execute. And the difference is I'm not the one writing it, but I'm still telling the story through them as a vehicle. And they appreciate how I approach them because I understand them, because reporters, because I was one. I know what it takes to be able to tell a story. I know how to sell a story because I used to sell stories to my editors, right? So it was like, I know what makes a good story. I know timely news hooks. How do I make things work? The nuance in the storytelling approach to make sure that you can try to, get something done, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also respecting their deadlines, like asking, I already know if someone wants to tell a powerful story, a cover story, hey, who are the strong secondary sources I should offer them off the rip? Instead of just being like, oh, do a cover story on like my client. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, do this, but I can get you some strong,
What does that mean?
So like, for example, right? So we had Yo Gotti on the cover of Forbes a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
As I was pitching in the approach, I was like, hey, like, we could probably get you like some really strong secondary sources, like, whether it's, Michael Rubin, and I'll never promise these things, but I know Gotti's network, and I know for something of this magnitude, I think some of the people in his circle would be willing to help. I said, maybe there's a possibility of a potential quote from Jay-Z. I don't know, but we can check, right? But even that, and Jay ended up contributing a quote to Gotti's cover story that brought the story to a different level, right? So I think it's when you think of that, or even like Druski's Billboard #1's cover, right?
Yeah, congrats, by the way.
Thank you, man.
That's big.
Yeah, no, it was. I'm proud of that one. Proud of him. But it's like
the worlds are converging.
Yeah. So is that? It's like, hey, maybe there's Kenya Barris, right? Maybe there's, like Snoop or whatever. We weren't able to get it done with Snoop at the last second, but we were able to get them like, Shane Gillis. We got them Kenya Barris. We got different people.
So those are the secondary stories.
Secondary sources. So that if you're the journalist writing the cover story, so yeah, to take it back, right? So if you're the journalist writing the cover story on Yo Gotti or Druski, right? You also want to be like, hey, who else can I talk to outside of that individual, that subject, that is gonna be able to add more to this story, share interesting perspectives, share new narratives that I haven't heard to take this story to the next level, right?
Okay, got you.
So that's why it's one of those things where when I'm pitching, I'm not just pitching. It was like, hey, I'll give you so and so, whatever. And some covers do, right? They're like, hey, we just want the interview subject and that's it.
Right.
But for others, and I know who is looking for what, they're going to be like, well, who are the secondary sources that are going to help elevate the story to the next level, right? And then that's where it's like, well, hey, if I give you these strong ass secondary sources, it's going to take the story to the next level. So that's why even with Forbes, like obviously, having a quote from Jay-Z about Yo Gotti just helped take the cover story to just the next level again. That is just like, that also got the Forbes team to really believe in it. Again, I never promise anything off the rip. I'm just throwing them ideas like, here's who I'm happy to look into and explore. Maybe we can make it work and see. But at least that's showing the proactive thinking to try to assist them, to help them do their job. So instead of them trying to think who's a good secondary source, it's like, oh shit, like this publicist is already trying to help me do my job. And that's part of the job, is how do you make the reporters' jobs easier? Right? So that's why having that perspective as a former reporter, I can already proactively take that step.
I say it's an art form in itself, right?
Correct. It's nuance. It's a lot of nuance.
Yeah. Is that part of the storytelling that you're also telling the editors when you're talking about a story, storytelling, or is that separate?
All the time. Yeah. Absolutely. And again, sometimes it helps. Sometimes they want to go in a different direction with it.
Sure.
But at least filling them with a lot of that knowledge of just like different stories of different relationships with people and what can take things to the next level. I think, that's always just a really, really powerful way to just tell a story.
One of the things that you said earlier that really struck a chord with me is that artists will come to you that want to work with you and they say they just like, I'm dropping music and like, just do your job, right? And you're like, it don't really work that way.
Yeah.
So what do artists and managers get wrong in this day and age of working with a publicist?
I think sometimes that, I think some managers and just some artists in general as a whole, as we are all tasked with evolving as the industry evolves, some people take longer to evolve than others and say like, hey, but this worked. This has been the traditional way of doing press and PR. And it's like, it was, but now things have changed, right?
And they changed.
And being understanding and receptive to the fact.
Yeah.
And not everyone's going to get that sometimes. Sometimes people are like, no, but this is how it's supposed to be. And I'm like, it was like this at a certain point. But we have to be mindful of it now, where it's like, the narrative, there has to be a narrative. If there's no narrative, if there's no story to tell, what's going to separate artist A from artist B?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's going to make this artist stand out from the marketplace? So anytime I'm taking on any new prospective clients, one of the first questions I ask is like, what are some of the stories about you that you feel like have not been shared with the world? What are those things like, and why do you feel like it hasn't, right?
Interesting.
And I try to kind of like push them, or like, okay, hey, outside of music, what else do you like, right? Do you like anime? Do you like real estate? Do you invest, right? Like, do you like sports? You know, whatever the case may be, because again, that helps with putting together a strategy of like, what else can we do to share your narrative? If someone's, oh yeah, I was a former college football player. Okay, cool. That's a start. Maybe we can lean into that, because that can allow you to, be able to think through different ideas. Like, for example, we work with Mickey Guyton, obviously, phenomenal country artist, trailblazer in that space. And it was really one time, it was just some casual, I think we had booked her to do the national anthem at the NBA Cup last year. Now it'll be in NBA Cup in 2024. So we're there, and she mentioned to me like, oh yeah, when I was in high school, I used to play AAU ball. And I'm like, really? I didn't know you were a hooper. So then I went back to the NBA, and I'm like, hey, could we have her play in the NBA celebrity game?
Smart.
And because I didn't know, and I'm taking this new piece of information you gave me. I'm like, oh, you hoop, like for real. She's like, I was good. She's like, I just tore my ACL. And then the NBA was like, oh, let's do it. And they had her play in the NBA celebrity game. So that's what I mean by also knowing your clients beyond just the surface level. Exactly. Not enough people. A lot of people just listen to talk and say the next thing. Not enough people really listen to listen and process the information and take every piece of information you're receiving from a client, from a manager, and figuring out, how does this new piece of information help me propel you and your client to the next step, into further goals.
Yeah.
So I took that piece of information. I'm like, oh, boom, we have to do this. And it turned out phenomenally. And even to, her team had told me that was one of the highest streaming days she had this year, just because it put her in a new audience, in front of a whole big sports audience.
Oh, shit.
And it came from just active listening, making that comment. I'm like, oh, huh.
From her playing in the NBA Celebrity All-Star Game, that became her highest streaming day on
music? It was a high streaming day of the year for her, from what her team had told me. It was just because there was a lot of people. Huh?
In music.
Oh, and her music for this year, for it was just, I wouldn't say it was the highest, but it was just like, it was definitely one of the peak days that they identified in their data, because a lot of people, when she's being put in front of this new platform playing in the NBA Celeb game, a lot of people have been like, yo, let me check this out. Who is she? And then checking out her music, right?
You're right.
So that was one of those times where you actually see kind of quantifiable, like, data from something that you had actually executed. But it stemmed from when we had her doing the national anthem, and we're just bullshitting and talking, and you take, she lets that information of how she used to hoop. And not only did we have her in the celeb game, but then we had her do a couple sports interviews, as well, where she would, to amplify her participation in the game, then talking about how she played AAU, and then talking about some of her favorite NBA players. Like, we had like Lou Williams and Michelle Beadle interview her, and like Lou Williams didn't know like how much of a fan she was, and she's like, no, Lou, like, I was devastated when you left the Clippers. And he was like stunned, like, wait, you for real? Like, you really know? So it's just one of those things where it's just like where you can be an active listener, and you try to push your clients and learn as much about them as possible to figure out and brainstorm new forms of storytelling, new ideas. Yeah. Because you're always trying to just reinvent yourself and just bring new thoughts, to the table. But that can't happen without you getting kind of that information from artists. So that's why, I try to push that all the time. It's like, know the people you're representing. Push for more information. Learn about them outside of the music. What's their true narrative? What are their true interests? Because if they're really interested in something, they're going to be more inclined to want to do it and speak about it from a press perspective.
Yeah, real talk. When is it that you know that an artist is ready to have proper PR versus not?
Great question. I think it's where the storytelling is, in my opinion. Even artists from I think, let me rephrase that. From when I decide I want to take them on from ourselves, right? I think any artist, you're going to need any form of storytelling to be able to get yourself to the next level. You're starting out, but you always have to identify what is it about you that separates you from everybody else. Mm-hmm. And if there's not a good enough reason, then that's where you as an artist have to work through that reason. Sometimes it's just letting the music speak for itself. Mm-hmm. But that's why it's, again, what are those other intangibles? What are these other things about your narrative that is going to make it easier for me to share your narrative with the world, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. It's like, because otherwise it's like, we're in this era now where everyone's just bogged down with music, whatever the case would be, constant music artists, but you're not getting the narrative. That's what made you care about them. And, 20, 30 years ago was the story behind them.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, how do we make that story behind them for you to care, for you to have an emotional connection with them outside of just the music?
Right. It's one of those things that's also really hard to tell a story, because you said there's a lot of noise out there. And one thing that a lot of artists need to consider is that, artists in the music business, or artists in general now, when it comes to music, they don't have a dedicated place that they can go to and like really just specifically talk about music when it comes to these social media platforms. There's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's YouTube, but these aren't music platforms. They're entertainment platforms, which means you're competing with the Druskis of the world. You're competing with politics. You're competing with sports. You're competing with streamers. So how do you really definitively tell your story with all of these different platforms that aren't specific to music?
Man, I think I see opportunity with that. That's why.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, there's opportunity with that, right? So it's like every interview you do, every platform is an opportunity to introduce yourself to a new audience.
Yeah.
And maybe you may get a different story out of it in one platform that, you may get from a different platform. You know what I mean? Like Neo, you may get a different story out of him when he's on, CBS Mornings, right? Compared to when he's going to be on Bloomberg, or when he's going to be on a creator like,
or Joe and Jada.
Exactly,
Yeah.
Joe and Jada, right? So it's just like
That's my first time hearing that he's going into the country world.
Space, yeah. And that even for me, that's really exciting from a storytelling perspective, because even with someone like him who's been in the game for 20 years, there's a whole new opportunity for a new level of storytelling, which I think is phenomenal. It's one of my favorite things to do. Like we had him present at the CMA Awards, which was phenomenal. We were able to get him to perform at the Grand Ole Opry, which is like a rite of passage in the country space, right?
Okay.
So just even being able to, when we, all agreed, with his management, like, hey, why don't we preview a song, for Joe and Jada,
right,
and like do that. Like that was part of a collective strategy where we all were like, hey, like let's give them a little taste just so that they can, and that clip blew up.
It blew up.
It blew up because that honestly prompted us to change the strategy. They were looking at a different single, but they just decided let's give the world a taste of this one on Joe and Jada, and because it blew up so much, ended up pivoting and like, I
want to touch on that.
Yeah.
So in real time, things got to change on the fly, especially in this day and age. How important is it that you can be able to pivot?
Oh, all the time.
And not fight it.
All the time. And you have to, especially, we work in such a high pressure environment where, artist teams change their mind, management teams change their mind, things that are out of your control happen so frequently. Like one of the things I take a lot of pride in as a professional is I learned a long time ago when I was younger, like, focus on the things you can control, and that's it. Don't stress yourself out about the things you can't control. And there's a lot of times where because things change so frequently, a lot of people get really bogged down and get so pissed about things changing, where my approach is just take it as a matter of fact. This happened, okay, let's adjust to it, as opposed to like, but why did this change? Why did this happen? A lot of people try to fight that. And it's like, you don't have to just keep fighting it, right? It's just like, okay, it happened. Like if there's room for it, sometimes you push back, sure. But it's like, sometimes you just got to accept that it happened. You may be on a tight time crunch. So it's like, yo, at this point, I got to figure it out. I don't have a lot of time. And I think one of the funniest, craziest experiences I had that, goes to your point about just kind of adaptability and like in real time was, it's probably about like 2019. This is when I was working with Meek Mill. I was also working with Michael Rubin. We handled Meek's publicity, also working with Michael and handling his PR, and obviously the Reform Alliance, the criminal justice reform organization. And we went to Pennsylvania. This is like middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, where they went to go visit a gentleman that had been incarcerated simply because he just he couldn't, like, it was a nonviolent thing. He didn't have enough money to be able to get himself out of there and pay, and because he was on the probation and parole system, he was incarcerated just because he didn't have the funds to pay like a ticket. So long story short, they're visiting him. We're gonna do this press conference outside of the prison for them to talk and advocate for the story. While they're visiting, like once they set foot in there, we find out the prison's like, nah, you can't do any interviews here. Now, mind you, you're in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. So I'm like, shit, I had all these media outlets coming here. Like I had a bunch of media outlets coming. We can't do it here anymore. They're meeting with this guy. They're going to be out in 30 minutes. Where the hell am I putting this press conference at? So I'm just going through my phone and I see like there's a Wawa, maybe like 5-7 minutes out, and I'm like, oh shit, they got a parking lot there. So we go to the Wawa. I'm like, oh, this is perfect. Let's just do it at the Wawa, but like in the parking lot. But the parking lot has a picturesque background, so you don't actually know you're doing it in a Wawa parking lot.
Frame
But
the
exactly. So we set it up. I told everybody change the ID. I was like, yo, the address now is this area. Sent everybody to the Wawa. Once Meek and Michael came out, I was like, just come to this location. We did the whole press conference at a Wawa, but again, you wouldn't have been able to tell because where the parking lot was facing, it was just such a nice picturesque background.
That's what's up.
But
We'll pull it up.
Yeah. But it's one of those things where you had to be adaptable on the fly, and rather than try to continue to push back on like why the prison wasn't going to let you do interviews, is accepting the circumstances as they are, realizing, okay, I'm on a tight crunch. How do I make this work on this tight of a turnaround and be able to execute the job?
But where does that come from? Because you've always been super cool under pressure, like always, like very calm.
Mm-hmm.
How did you develop that?
So I would say one of the turning points for me, it was one of the toughest moments of my life, my career, excuse me, was when I was transitioning out of journalism. And I went from, again, I was 23 covering the Red Sox, doing TV on top of the world, and actively deciding to change careers and move to PR. But in order to do that, I had to move from Boston back to Jersey. I was living in my boy's attic. I'm an only child. My parents, were living in Colombia. They had moved, once I got in my first job. So I'm like, I'm on my own, right? So I'm living off of like my savings and kind of like figuring, shit out. And I'm trying to apply to these jobs in this new career that I have no experience in. And it was a really tough time because like I was always a straight A student, super smart, super everything on point. And it was one of the first times where I just lost my swag in the sense of things weren't working out for me. I'm applying to these jobs. Nothing's coming my way. I wasn't in the best place.
Mm-hmm.
And it finally came to the point where, like, I remember one day where I would just apply to as many jobs as I could, and I'm just feeling exasperated. I'm living in my boy's attic. And finally, I'm like, you know what? This is where I went back to that concept. I focus on the things I can control, and that's it. And I'm like, you know what? As long as I did everything in my power in this current moment to put myself in the best position for tomorrow, I can live with the results, good or bad. And it was kind of just like this eureka moment where I'm just kind of like, I applied to a bunch of these jobs. Hopefully something comes, but I can lay my head on my pillow tonight knowing I did everything I could with all the information and the power I had today to put myself in the best position for tomorrow. And that just changed the way I viewed the world, because for the longest time, I always wanted to control. Like I always wanted to control everything. And I think that it's helpful in business, but sometimes it can also be to your detriment. And it was to that part where I'm realizing, you know what, like you can't always keep trying to control the outcome and trying to get things you want. Like obviously to the best of your abilities,
For
right?
sure.
That's still part of the job. You're controlling people's images as a publicist, but also knowing that with the information I had, everything at the moment, I made the best decision I could with everything I had at that moment. I could live with the results. It's where if there was a careless mistake or something where I'm like, well, damn, I deserve that L on that one. You know what I mean? And I take pride in saying I don't usually make careless mistakes. Mistakes are going to be part of life in general. But I think that's what's kind of just shaped my view of world, of life. And just that approach has always kind of just, moved into how I handle my business. It's like, all right, like this is what it is. Like,
Yeah.
I live with the result and I keep it moving. And, even with as an entrepreneur, like last week, I remember it was like one morning, it was 8:30 a.m. and it's like there was already 3 things with 3 different clients going like completely awry. This was not a good morning.
Always.
Right?
Everything will hit at once.
Of course, hit at the same time. And it's just being able to compartmentalize and not let that deter you, and realizing, you know what? Well, shit, it's 8:20, so the day can get better from here. You know what I mean? As opposed to like some people be like, shit, it's gonna be a long day. Like, okay, all right, like let me just think through this. All right, these problems suck. Let me deal with it. But that doesn't mean that a couple hours later, the fortune can't turn around.
Yeah.
So just being able to compartmentalize, which I think is a really, really big key of just life as a whole, but even as an entrepreneur, is making sure because. As a publicist and as a business owner, you're also carrying the problems of everybody on your back.
I was going to say that. Yeah, right? Exactly. So you got to be even killed.
Of course. So it's like not only are you handling your clients' problems, you're handling your employees' problems. And not to mention, obviously, in your personal life from those loved ones. So it's just like being able to be very mentally tough and make sure you compartmentalize and pick and choose. And I always like to tell my team all the time, like, This is not a today problem. This is a tomorrow problem. We'll deal with that tomorrow. Still a problem, just not a today problem.
Right. I love that you talked about that and brought that up, because as an entrepreneur, I don't want people to get the misconception that you're doing this all by yourself.
Course,
you have a team. Talk to me a little bit about your team. How big is your team? What are the different departments and all that?
Absolutely. So, have 6 employees at the moment. So obviously have some senior leaders with me, have some entry-level positions, and have some people in between as well. Obviously one of the senior leaders that works with me, has worked with me for 7 years. So Chantel's, she's somebody that it's when you bring somebody who knows you already, that helps the foundation with your company, right?
Yeah.
And then obviously just been bringing different people along the way. We have Alexis, who's another senior lead that we brought in probably a year and a half ago as well. And it's about just trusting your senior leaders to then be able to also put the rest of your team, empower them and put them in positions to succeed, right? And obviously it comes with a lot of trust. So it's one of those things where it's like, like anything, in the same way when you're cultivating that trust with your clients, it's cultivating that with your team and making sure that you have very transparent dialogue with your team. Like one of the things I like to say is, like, I like to foster an atmosphere of transparency. Like, I don't want to be in the situation where if you got a problem, if you're upset, you feel bogged down, how can I fix a problem if I don't know about it? I tell them that all the time. Like, if there's some type of issue, whether it's with your workload, whether the way I deliver something with a client, whatever the case may be, tell me. Like, we all adults, right? I encourage transparent conversation, because a lot of people, for whatever reason, just, don't like to have tough conversations.
And what the thing is with that as well is that, like, it doesn't mean that you have to have the conversation right away, because sometimes the emotions might be too high. Right? If there's some issues that you have with somebody, and depending on the personality, it might be really heated.
Yeah.
Take a day or two, then come back and have the conversation. Because if you're really upset and you say something crazy, that changes the course of the direction of the relationship, no matter what.
For sure.
So it's always important, it doesn't have to be confrontational. It can be a conversation to find a solution or a trade-off, right? Instead of feeling sour about a certain way that something was handled in the work environment, you figure out how to be able to course correct.
Right.
But take a moment.
Yeah. Well, one thing you brought up that's really interesting is, well, not interesting, but it's something I adhere to that's a strong point, is for some people that strategy may work, and other people, they may want it off the rip, and making sure you adjust to your personnel and adjust to the clients and the people you work with. Like, there's a lot of, I think in another world, I joke, but it's the truth. In another world, I would love to have been a psychologist, because I love the psychology of people, right? In the sense of, like, hey, what may work with you, right, may be different than, maybe work with the producer over here, right?
Yeah.
And it's just making sure I can tailor my message accordingly to that audience. So I take that approach not only with my team members, where, like, hey, maybe one person can deal with the blunt discussion while the other one may need to wait a couple of days to talk through something. But even with my clients, right? Well, like, the clients, you can't treat a E40, the same way you treat a Too Short, right? You can't treat, a Druski, the same way, you do a Flage, whatever the case may be, and making sure, like, you tailor your approach to everybody. So that way, it's like knowing what their wants and desires and how they like to communicate. Some people are more phone calls, other may be more texts, you know what I mean? But other maybe like other ones can take more of the straight message, whereas the other one maybe it's more of a team conversation where you know what I mean, where they can receive the message a little bit more. Like, so it's just making sure.
You got to figure out. Yeah. It's true. You got to figure out who you're dealing with and working with, right?
Yeah.
Really, I got the psychiatrist vibe, so that's how I was just giving you my trauma. I got to chill a couple of days. It works for me, to be honest with you. But I've also gotten to a point in my career, I'm in my 18th year in this business, entertainment business.
Right.
And I've been an entrepreneur for so many years. I built multiple companies that generated millions in revenue. And I'm like, I realize, like, at this point, it is like, I can't get as, I can't, the leader that I am today is a leader with a lot more patience than I had prior to.
Right.
And if there is something that is frustrating me, sometimes it truly, for me, it's a thing where it's like, if something is really getting at me, it's because it's a reoccurring theme.
Right.
And I can't fix it. So then if I get upset about something, then I'll step away from the conversation, revisit it afterwards.
Right.
But you're right. Not everybody is like that.
Yeah.
You have to be able to know who you're dealing with, because some people will take offense to that.
For sure. Like, I'm the type of person, I like to confront things head on. I usually like to do it quicker than later, but also,
of course.
You can't take, but you can't take that.
Emotion.
But you can't take that approach with everybody, for sure, right? Because then some people were just like, yo, it's business. Some people may not be able to take that off the bat. So it's exactly that. I think that's the beauty of, again, going to the psychology of all of us as different human beings. And I think that's, what enables us to be able to move in specific, in any industry. It's not just entertainment, right? But I think especially with the caliber of people we deal with and the amounts of people, because it's not just the personalities. You're talking about also just the managers as well, right? Because you got the managers who are involved, right? And how do you get everybody on the team to be able to like also work together to help you on something? So just being mindful of that. I think that's just one of the things I especially when I'm looking to hire people, the big thing I look for a lot is like, do you know how to read the room? Are you capable of reading the room?
Right.
Because you can't fully teach that skill, right? And the people who have that are really ones that's like, all right, at the very least, that's part of the battle that I know I can leave you alone, and you'd be able to navigate some of the unspoken body language of who may be in a good place to do something, who may be not in the best place for an interview or for whatever, a prep briefing conversation, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Okay, but if you can try and teach that, how can you read the room?
I mean, I think it's studying body language. I think a lot of people, when you talk about communication,
tonality,
they just they think about the words, right? But then I think the other thing is also going back to what we discussed earlier, being an active listener. Sometimes it's how somebody says something.
Yeah.
Do they say it with that bass in their voice? Do they say it as It's all these little nuances that you really, really have to. And if as you cultivate relationship with your clients, with your managers, that's cool versus like, yeah, is different, right? Some the person may be like, oh, maybe it's a yes, where I take that as like, maybe that's like not a full yes, that's like a kind of like a yes with a couple question marks.
I might have to circle back.
Exactly, right? So being able to, I think it's a couple ways of just being an active listener.
Yeah.
And making sure, study the tonality of how a specific message is delivered. It can be literally 1 or 2 words, but the way it's delivered can be a big difference versus how, getting somebody to react to a certain way, selling an interview idea or pitching somebody in an idea to do something, whether it's received well or not. The other thing is body language. And you can even tell that on a Zoom. You can't do it as well as in person, obviously.
Yeah.
But just making sure you're also studying like how tuned in is this person to this idea, what's the level of eye contact looking like when you're in person, what is their body language telling you? Are you locked in with me? Or are you kind of giving me the, you're just looking around it. And all these little things are also going to help you be able to read the room and figure out what's the right time and place to have a conversation with your client. If you want to bring a couple interview opportunities and talk to them, do you see, are they distracted? Are they overwhelmed? Or are they just chilling and peaceful? And those are kind of helps you determine whether this is a good time or not to be able to present something to your client or not.
I remember doing a sales job a long time ago, and I did it for 5 years. And the one thing they taught you off the rip was that in communication, you're only taking in 7% of the words.
Correct.
The majority of it is body language, and second is tonality.
Yeah.
Right? So I hear you on that. That's actually super important. You talk about managers, and there's a lot of managers out here who act more like a superstar than they're artists.
Sure.
Talk to me about like when it's been easy to deal with a manager versus not. Like, what are the things that you should be doing? Because the manager publicist relationship is
critical.
That's a critical one.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit about what success looks like for that relationship.
I mean, I think it's like any relationship. I study them as much as they should be studying me, right?
Yeah.
And it's figuring out what are the strengths and weaknesses of this particular individual. How is the best way to communicate? Can you communicate with them on the phone? Or are they more of a texter and things like that? There's been like a manager or two in the past for old clients that we've worked with that, they wanted to be the superstar. And I learned very quickly this is not going to go far because you're prioritizing your own needs over the individual's needs, over the client's needs. This is not going to go far. Like, we'd still kind of rock it out, but it was just times where it was like,
you see where it's going.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's just like when the manager's trying to crash the interview and be part of it with said client, it's like, you know what I mean? So
Oh, you've seen that before.
I've seen that. Yeah, you know, it's very rare, but I've been on part of those, and it's an absolute headache. And that's when you know that, you know, it's really the most successful relationships with managers are the ones that, again, are also good listeners, that are open-minded, and that, you know, are prioritizing the client's needs over their own. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
the client being the artist in this case.
Correct. Or the talent, you know, the comedian, you know, whatever the case may be. And I think that's part of it, is because, you know, when you see, you know, I tell people all the time, like, I can't want it more than you.
Oh, I see that.
I can't want it more than the artist or the manager. So if you catch yourself on, like, I really want this, but you're not getting that same level of excitement from, you know, the manager or whatever the case may be, like, there's only so much you can do. Yeah. Right. So, you know, I've been fortunate that, again, a lot of the managers we work with for our clients, like, we have such very strong, you know, candid, like, discussions, like, through the good and through the bad, that, like, we can, again, I'm a straight shooter. So, like, and, you know, you can't really take a lot of things personally, but it goes both ways too. So being able to, like, if I have, you know, some level of feedback I want to give you, at least, you know, hear me out. Just let me rock. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I'm doing it. If I'm giving it, it's also to be able to, you know, for the greater good of the artist. And, you know, for me as well, right? Yeah, I'm always open to feedback. I'm always open to learning and evolving. You know what I mean? By all means, I'm not, you know, I'm not perfect, you know what I mean? So there's always ways we can sharpen our operations. My thing is, as long as we can just be straight up with one another across the board, those are the best relationships. Like, you know what I mean?
So when it comes to you said that you can't want it more than the artist. And that happens a lot in this business.
For sure.
Right? Yo, how do you actually stop yourself from, like, you see a artist and a team, and, like, I really want to work with these guys.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like there's this feeling that I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna go well, but I really fuck with this artist, and I can see them going to another level if they just change a couple of things. How do you actually stop yourself from working with that artist?
Well, you have to do your research, right? So every time, you know, and this is just advice and game in general, but when a prospective client comes your way, you have a conversation. A lot of people think, like, you're the only one on the receiving end of, like, yo, they're vetting me. Nah, I'm vetting you too. You know what I mean? This is a two-way street. I do my homework on you, and I make my calls around the industry. How is this individual to work with? How is this management team to work with? Right? So it's like, as we all should, right? We should always be doing our homework anytime you're coming into any meeting with anybody.
Yeah.
So there's been times where, like, I've turned away, you know, clients that were, you know, massive names, but I heard that they were just very difficult to work with, and, you know, they didn't have the proper operations team, you know, in place. And my thing is just, like, making sure it has to be about timing, but it has to be about a collaborative effort and being able to have, again, that level of transparent dialogue and communication. So that's just any big piece of advice for anyone, whether you're a publicist, marketer, whomever, and you're getting, you know, prospective business your way. Do your homework on that team too, right? And not just in the music industry. This is any industry. Do your homework on that prospective client. Is it gonna match the synergy, right? Is it something where it can work? And the other thing you can try to structure is just sometimes, like, hey, maybe let's test it out for a 3-month period,
right?
And let's see how this works, right? And then let's do the initial agreement for 3 months, and we see how it is. And if it's a fit, cool. And if not, all good. We keep it moving, and at least that way, you know, you guys have been able to at least try it and see if if that relationship, you know, can develop and flourish. So,
yeah. See, you know, the develop and flourish is, that's where, like, you really start to get in line with each other and figure things out, and it starts to go into a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
What's the biggest misconception that an artist and a manager has that a publicist can do for them?
I mean, I think the biggest misconception, I think right now is also just kind of like, hey, we just got to set up these interviews. Like, yo, this promo run, album dropping, this, you know, so-and-so's going to be in a movie, like, let's do promo. But it's also like, we're strategists, we're collaborators in strategy. So it's also like, hey, as much as we can, because we know sometimes it's out of all of our controls, including the manager, but, like, what can we do in advance to strategize proactively and come up with interesting campaigns, ideas that we can bring to life, as opposed to being reactive, right? There's a lot of PR that are just strictly reactive, where I react to the situation. What about proactive PR? How can we be proactive together as a unit? You know, if we know, okay, hey, you know, we're at the top of 2026, right? We have all this coming. This is kind of like the roadmap. giving us a rough roadmap so we can figure out what ideas we can move on. Like, I think that's part of it. And also, there's a whole part of crisis PR as well, right?
I was going to add,
yeah. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of publicists in general who are good publicists only when things are going great. Like, hey, when things are going great, this is phenomenal, I can do everything. But when when there's an arrest, when there's a particular situation, a legal battle, whatever the case may be, is making those adjustments accordingly. And again, being able to also, be able to work in tandem with an individual's legal team, and just being able to be cognizant of like, hey, when things are bad, how do you approach that as well? Because at the end of the day, PR, right? Some people just see PR, to your earlier question, as just like, hey, uplifting an image and the visibility and the public profile of that brand, not just an individual, but just the brand. The individual is a brand.
Yeah.
How do you uplift it? But it's not just about uplifting the brand. It's about protecting the brand too. So you're not just on offense, you're playing defense too. So it's like being able to also be cognizant of that, because some people just look at it as a straight offense, amplifying the brand.
You have an example? Well, I mean, the stuff with
Meek.
Meek.
With Meek Mill, absolutely.
Yeah.
So even with Meek, right, obviously, that was one of the things that played a very instrumental role in my career, where he was incarcerated, being able to educate the public about how much of an injustice it really was, right? And then it really started off as just like, it started off obviously in music and entertainment, but the way we really made people care is also taking this discussion into other verticals, where it was like, hey, it's not this, when Michael Rubin got involved, hey, this made this a sports story. So now all of a sudden, like, we can touch the sports outlets. But then really, this is really ultimately what we saw, a criminal justice reform story and an opportunity to use, Meek Mill's story, right? This man who has a lot of resources and connections and who's still incarcerated for a technical probation violation. Now, just imagine the average Robert Williams person who doesn't have those connections or the financial resources,
right?
What that individual is. So it's like, okay, hey, this is an opportunity to really shed light and educate the world on like what is going on in our criminal justice system, right? And that's, again, working very closely with his legal team, right? And to the point that I was like, I joke a lot with some of the lawyers we work with different clients. I'm like damn near like, a lawyer, because now just getting a cadence of like being able to, read through legal filings and complaints, and how do you take that information, digest it, and articulate it and break it down in layman's terms to media outlets and reporters so that they can get the message, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things where it's like, again, understanding that form of storytelling. And I think that was really big with Meek, that also just kind of helped me over the course of my career with just other crisis, PR, campaigns that we had to work.
And I think it was like if, to be like very transparent and honest, and I hope that, I'm not offending anybody when I say this, but like that was also at a time when Meek Mill's like, it was pretty rough for him in the media in general, just period, right? And so I don't think I've ever seen that kind of like 180 transformation where everybody was again on Meek's side. Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but it was like really a 180 transformation of the story of Meek Mill when he was going through that incarceration and how serious this is of an issue in America. So like I say that to say like congrats on like how you were able to change that narrative for him, and obviously that really helped in your career.
Absolutely.
But it was like that was like a pretty pivotal thing back then.
Yeah, and it was a testament, obviously working with Rock Nation, with Michael Rubin and that. And it was just really, it's really about humanizing, his story in a way. Yes. And I think that's what really made it successful, is just like humanizing the story and making it resonate with, that can happen to any of us, And
that's a crazy thing too, because like, I think like people forget like, when, these are humans you're dealing with at the end of the day, and because you don't know them, because they're superstars, like you feel like on the online, like you can just, meme culture gets out of hand, the things that you say, like all this wild stuff starts to happen, right? So you have, like you said, you got to figure out how to protect this, because there's a person on the other side of that, right?
Course, yeah.
And in that moment in time, that person is going through some real shit, right?
Absolutely, without a doubt. It's really understanding the humanity, because again, there's still this disconnect, right, where people just treat celebrities as like they're like gods, and that they're not allowed to have emotions, they're not allowed to have bad days. And you know what I mean? It's just like we're all human. We all carry a lot, and I think even in general, just the the mental health conversation in the industry, in the entertainment industry as a whole is something that I think there needs to be broader conversations, because it's not just the artists. You see so many people behind the scenes that I think, because of how demanding the schedule is and just with the unpredictability of it, you know what I mean? It's having, just approaching everything with empathy, honestly.
Yeah, real shit. You know what? It's a good point that you bring up, because even it was 2017, 2018 when that was all happening with Meek. Mental health wasn't discussed nearly as much as it is today.
Correct.
So even to talk about that back then was like a risk. But it played out in the right way, because we all deal with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think obviously just, being incarcerated for, when you're pretty much like 23 hours in a cell, and 1 hour, and just even just as I learned more about the criminal justice system, working with Reform Alliance and working with Van Jones and everybody, just really learning about just like just the level of challenges that come with mental health when it comes to the criminal justice, even being on probation. Like you're out, but like one small mistake, if you're past a curfew and you got to go get diapers for your kid and you can't be up past 8 o'clock, but you ran out of diapers, you're good. There's some parents that are going to go get the diapers. They're going to risk their freedom, that with police contact, they could be sent to prison just like that. And just the mental health challenges that comes with that. So even just that, for me, just educated me to a whole different sector of our criminal justice system. And just kind of just some of the challenges that happen there. So obviously that was, something that Meek talked about a lot specifically, and just kind of the trauma that created and caused, is not only for him, but, so many other people. And even working with, who's still one of our clients is Van Jones, and how he's been just, completely outspoken about that as well.
I love that you bring up Van Jones, because something that I found really fascinating and interesting with him is when Charlie Kirk passed away. Can you walk me through if you guys had a conversation? Because he went on CNN, a platform that obviously isn't, favorable to Charlie Kirk in the past. But he went on that platform and he said transparently Charlie Kirk reached out to him to have a debate. And this is but he didn't see that. And when he saw it, Charlie Kirk had already passed away. So he's reading this, and now he's communicating on CNN, that this man died because of free speech. He died because of a debate. Like that in itself is a risk, to him and to his base. Can you walk me through what that conversation looks like? Because I can imagine, obviously, knowing you'd be like, yo, fucking humans at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Let's take a beat for a second and just relax. But what does that conversation look like if you guys are having it prior to him going on the news and saying that on CNN and doing his best to diffuse what's happening in America, and especially in that moment?
Absolutely. I mean, with him or with any client, you're always talking about what are the pros and cons of a strategy and a particular approach, right? So, we had the conversations kind of looking at, where that could go. But at the end of the day, and again, I've worked with Van for also, 8 years, something like that. Van has always been the individual to reach out to the other side of the aisle, right? And even working with him, Reform Alliance is always a bipartisan organization, right? Democrats and Republicans coming together on shared territory, shared ground for one greater good,
I didn't
right?
know that. Okay, yeah.
So that's also one of those things where Van has always prided himself and has been a bridge builder, or bringing different communities. So again, for me, it's literally on track with who Van Jones is as a human being, as a man, as a professional, everything. It's like, hey, again, let's work together. We all agree, that this tragedy, was fucked up. But it's again, how can we have conversations with someone that we share differing, political perspectives about, but what are the things we can come together for the greater good of society, right?
Yeah.
And I just think that's just something that I always, just even from working with Van, has been very commendable, is that fearlessness of being able to have this conversation with people with differing opinions, knowing sometimes you're going to get criticized, but knowing that there's a bigger plan and a greater good for that. And I think even just working with Reform, there's different people from different political affiliations on that organization. I worked with Meek and Mike Rubin and Rock Nation and Meek to launch that organization, but it was really hey, in order to get this legislation passed, it has to be a bipartisan effort, right?
Yeah.
So that, in that example is of course, just with Van, with any client, you're going to talk through the pros and cons of a strategy, but also knowing Van and just who he is as a man, knowing again, if there's an opportunity to bring two groups together You know what I mean? And for the greater good of our society, I'm gonna do that.
Need more of that. Need more of that. I really respected that when I saw that clip. I was like, it's especially at such a heated moment in history. All right. So I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive, to be honest with you. But, I mean, I say that to say, like, why should that be so impressive? It's just like, this is something that is just like, as humans, we should be able, be able to disagree. And that's something that he said. He's like, I disagree with this guy a lot. Yeah. Like, we get into it a lot, but at the end of the day, it's like, man, like, ease.
Yeah, well, just to bring it back in general, I think that's why just communication, the art of communication. That's why I'm so thankful for my background at Syracuse, because either which way, it gave me the foundation as a communicator, as a journalist, right? To be, my thing is, if you have strong communication skills, you can do whatever industry you like for the most part, right? But the basic tenet of anything and everything we do comes down to communication at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And that's why I just think that's so critical as people trying to get in our industry. Like, I think, again, whether it's obviously pursue what you're going to pursue, but I would always recommend anyone, especially that's coming up right now and trying to figure out how to make it in this industry in general, but, not only in entertainment, but just in any industry, is I would just recommend at least taking a couple of psychology classes and a couple of communication classes. I think that's going to be so critical to just whatever field you decide, to figure out how do you, articulate orally, how do you understand the psychology of the individual you're working with to work together to get something done, whether that's a lawyer, whether that's communicating as a doctor, for your patient, and navigating sensitive, situations, whatever industry you're in, whether you're a manager, how you're managing your subordinates and you're trying to get them to believe in your vision. Mm-hmm. So that's just something where, as a whole, I just think, and that's why I love about my job in PR, is because it is communication, so communication heavy. But that's just something that I just like to preach as a whole, because I feel like we need a lot more of that.
I always tell people that they should also, that's great advice, but I think one of the other things that individuals should definitely do is do a sales job, even if it's for like a month or two. A lot of people get the idea of a sales job it's very misleading. Yeah. They think that they're trying to sell something and you got to be very like all this. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with, do you trust the person that is communicating this information to you? Yeah. And can you actually build that rapport with that person? Right. That's where the sales come in. Yeah. And by it's not like this idea of like always be closing. Like, sure, like you can have that kind of mentality, but like it really is like this guided. It's a conversation when you're selling with somebody, getting on the same level, meeting them where they're at. Yeah. Right. And then trying to figure out, how can you get on the same page? And as well, I think like the most important part of a sales job is that you believe in the thing that you're selling as well, right?
Absolutely.
That's super important. But you learn the psychology of a human being while you're doing that.
Yeah, no, but I mean, even in PR, right? You're selling the story.
Someone's selling, someone's buying.
To the reporter of like this idea, this creative idea. But then on the flip side, sometimes you're also selling an opportunity or vision to a client, where sometimes like, I don't know, do I really want to do this interview podcast? What's the value of it? Like,
true.
And then you have to give them reasons to buy into that vision. Yeah. Right. So you're gonna see it from that respect as well. I think another thing, even just adding on top of this, and I can't, this was brought to me by my boy Jose Nova. So shout out to Nova, but he also mentions like one thing where, as you're hiring people, should look at, and again, it's not a full prerequisite, but just be like, hey, have you played on, growing up, did you play on teams before? Because that just, when you're part of a team and you've already operated and gotten the foundation of being part of a team, that helps. When you're managing and working, operating as part of a professional team.
Also helps you understand how to win and lose.
Absolutely. 100%. So even with hearing that a little bit, that gave me new perspective as well. And, I think there's obviously, some exceptions in that play. Some people are able to make those adjustments, but, playing sports and being part of a team can certainly help in many ways. You know what I mean?
Who's your team growing up, Colombia or Portugal?
I mean, both. Nah, man. What you mean? Well, we can't pick one, brother. Nah, brother. They're both part of me, and I'm Cape Verdean too. So I'm Cape Verdean, Colombian.
Because they've been nicer in Colombia for a long time until now.
But the reason I say that is I got all three teams in the World Cup: Cabo Verde, Portugal, and Colombia.
All of them. We're in the same group.
Portugal and Colombia. I know we are. I know. Game in Miami.
Okay, who you going for?
Huh?
You know what I said. Who you going for?
I'm going for? Straight up, I'm going for a tie so that they both get the points and that they both advance in the group.
Okay. Good political answer.
Well, you know, I'm a
Off
publicist,
camera-
baby. I'm a publicist. What can I say?
Off camera, I'm gonna get the real answer from you, bro. But no, that's amazing. Look, you know what? I wanted to ask you because you're talking about communication. I gotta ask, working with Michael Rubin, multi-billionaire. What does that look like? What are some lessons that were learned there as you as an entrepreneur in your journey there?
Sure. No, I mean, working with Michael Rubin, working with Rock Nation and Desiree, but it just really is just, it's really learning. Like, that's part of the reason working with them is why I became an entrepreneur, because even just working at a previous agency and just studying them and study how, you know, they kind of just, you know, built these empires and how they would even encourage some of their, you know, people they work with to kind of, you know, have more ownership, right?
Yeah.
That's why I started learning the game just being in rooms and observing, right?
Yeah.
So it was an absolute blessing, because there's a lot of people, specifically in the entertainment industry, who are just happy to be in the room. Their goal is to be in the room with all these celebrities, whatever, and just be in the room as frequently as possible just to make it look like a flex. Not everybody, but there's a lot.
There's a lot.
And I think
There's a lot.
There is, yeah. But for me, right, like early on, when I'm in these rooms, I'm like, well, damn, this is dope. But I'm like, how do I make these rooms work for me, right? Because I was looking, I'm like, yo, I'm doing phenomenal stuff, right? And I'm chasing my passion. I'm working, you know, I was told at a young age by my father, whatever you decide to do, just make sure you're passionate about it, right? So, no, it was great. That's why I pursued sports journalism. I was obsessed with sports. That's why even entertainment and music is, you know, it's a part of what we do now. Now, all of what are, you know, we have corporate clients as well. But in this specific space, it's like, all right, so you're working something you're passionate, but like when you're in these rooms and watching, like, how can you make these rooms work for you? What can you learn? What is the game you can soak up? And it's really just studying, you know, these entrepreneurs and how they move and how they build their empires and how they take risks. It's really what I learned is calculated risk taking. So finally, when I'm like, okay, I have to go start my PR firm, that was a calculated risk. I was at an agency, you know, shout out my guy Ron Berkowitz, man, always loved for Ron. You know, I was, you know, working with you know, for my guy Ron, and, you know, it was a great, you know, role. I was really happy, really comfortable there, but I just felt that in order for my next level of growth, I had to go and take the step just because of what I'm seeing in these rooms, right? So it was just one of those things where it's really just taking, you know, calculated risks. You know, obviously there was a tremendous amount of fear. It was, you know, it was 4 years ago, you know, when I made that move, right?
Crazy.
Yeah. But it was one of those things where, again, it was realizing, yes, there's the possibility of failure, right? I can deal with failure, but I can't deal with the thought of not trying, right? Because I'm going to be haunted by that for the rest of my life. Like, shit, what if I did that? What if I tried?
Spoken like a true entrepreneur.
Right? So that's how I'm like, you know what? Like, I don't want to deal with that. You know what I mean? And one thing you learn as an entrepreneur is the more you do it, the more the risk-taking just continues in different ways and manifests itself to the point that you have to just learn to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. Plain and simple.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the reality of like of that is, I think people are afraid of taking those risks because they can't determine the outcome 110%. They need to know exactly what the outcome is. But truth is, as an entrepreneur, you don't know what the outcome is. You don't know what the result is. Even if you want the result to be this thing and say, what if it exceeds that result? You know? What if it actually takes you to a different place, but you have to be okay with that? And it's just navigating through that.
Absolutely.
That comes down to.
I mean, and it was also preparation. Like, I had paid maybe like 3 to 4 months of my mortgage in advance before I made the jump. So I'm like, all right, if this goes crazy, like, you know, I had already owned a condo. So I'm like, well, worst case, I can rent out one of the rooms or something. Like, I had contingencies for, like, if this didn't work out and I'm broke, I can do X, Y, and Z to still keep myself afloat, right?
Sure.
So it was a very, you know, calculated thought process to make sure that I was putting myself, again, in the best position to succeed with the information resources that I had at my disposal at that particular point. So,
so to that point, even with the artist and the manager, or, you know, somebody starting out independent, right? Like, how important is it that the artist is involved in the strategy with the publicist?
Oh, I think it's essential. Like, there's some camps that, like, they just want to leave. They don't want to fully integrate the artist. They want to just have the conversation with you know, with the manager. And listen, if you're a phenomenal manager that can for the most part, be, useful, right?
Yeah,
I think it can be sustainable.
Sometimes it's a necessity.
For sure, absolutely.
Because there's a lot coming
Absolutely, and you got to protect the artist, 100%.
Yeah.
Right? So sometimes if it's an excellent manager, it's sustainable in that respect.
Yeah.
But I still try to encourage it as much as possible. You want to hear straight from the individual, because I also want to be methodical with having me and my team bring the appropriate opportunities that the talent is going to find interesting. Right? Because there's some people who just want to just bring opportunities to the table just to like prove why they should be getting their retainer, in a month. And it's like, we really believe in bringing quality ops versus the quantity of ops. Like, I don't want to bring you no bozo opportunities. Everything I'm going to bring, I can explain why I think it's going to shift the narrative and elevate the narrative or be helpful or what the bigger picture is. Right.
Right.
And I think just being very, very methodical with that. Whereas like some people just want to throw shit until it, it sticks or something sticks. It's like, it's being able to really be strategical, methodical about, hey, this is why I think this can be beneficial. You know why? And if you don't want to do it, that's cool. I'm in the recommendation business. Here's my recommendation. You want to take it? Cool. If not, understood. Maybe we'll get it for the next op. And that's okay, right? There's going to be times where like there's been things that I've really believed in for a client and they just pass on it, and you still try to push one more time, just revisit and explain why. And if not, then you respect that, right? That's it. That's like, okay, cool. I still brought the job, but I just want to make sure you also give me the opportunity to explain my perspective, why I believe this is going to be beneficial to you in your career. And at least just give me that platform to make that case. If you still feel that it's not appropriate for you, I understood and I respect it. Keep it moving.
Okay, so from your perspective, and I know that this is a bit of a nuanced answer, right? But let's talk to the independent artist for a second. They can't afford a publicist. They can't afford a PR firm, right? They're starting from zero. How are they supposed to tell their story? What would you recommend, and how did they tell their story?
Well, if you're just an independent, person working just from the ground up, right? I think one thing, if you're so-and-so from Buffalo, right, coming up or whatever, well, okay, like maybe let me tap in with like interns who are studying PR at Buffalo State or Syracuse or whatever the case may be. And that's at least like a starting point where somebody has a vested interest, or maybe I don't have the financial resources, but maybe we can work together, be partners to help each other out. Where it's like, okay, you can help tell my story, right? And then that way, as I grow, you grow as well. And I make some money, I could throw something at you, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's just being very methodical in that respect, right?
And patience.
Yes, you have to be. You have to be.
Yeah.
So that's certainly part of it. But just trying to be resourceful and figure out, okay, if I only have a couple $100 I can give a month, right? Then it's like, all right, maybe it's just somebody who just graduated who's looking for some freelance work. And just, as a younger artist, you got to do some of that outreach as well. But I think obviously is finding people who, can gain from that experience, who maybe they can't gain from it financially too much, but they can gain from the experience as a, something to put on their resume just to start up.
So what does a bad pitch look like then?
A bad pitch in what
from the artist, like if an artist is trying to figure it out and then they get some emails from somebody at, one of these media outlets and they're like, hey, I want you to cover a story for me. What does a bad pitch look like versus a good pitch? I mean, is that even recommended?
From a publicist to a media outlet, or
from an artist to a media outlet.
So if the artist is pitching themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's the case, right? I mean, I would also say this is just my perspective. If you're an artist, maybe just create a different email and try to make it not seem like you're actually the one reaching out. This is just more a thought, right?
Happens more often than
for sure, right?
Yeah.
And it should. But if you're reaching out, then again, how does you always approach what you're sending? What makes your story stand out from everybody else's? There's tons of artists around the world. What makes you so unique? Why should now I'm putting my reporter hat on, right? Because I used to get inundated with pitches as a journalist as well.
True.
So we're just like, okay, what's going to make this stand out? Why should this be worth my time, right? So again, it's really just like, if you have an interesting story, hey, I was a college football player and then I decided to be a country artist, you know what I mean? Okay, that's something different, right? And just being able to articulate that and get straight to the point in the first sentence. Like, a lot of people, especially in entertainment, I think, just like when you're pitching, like, to get straight to the point in the first two sentences. Like, you want to make sure you get people, off the rip. What's the ask? What's the basis of your story? But again, you can't just be dependent solely on emails and cold outreach. Like, if you're an artist, you can try to move around, be a little outside, be at some events, Maybe you'll meet, editor at Billboard or editor at Rolling Stone or Variety, whatever the case may be. You can network and you build a rapport, and then maybe that's opportunity for you to sell yourself in person, right? And that's the other thing is, anytime you're in this room, this is a new opportunity for you to sell yourself, no matter if you're an artist, aspiring publicist, aspiring manager, whatever the case may be. Every day is a job interview. Every day is a job interview.
Yeah, real shit. So if an artist goes and sends out like 50 pitches, right? And nothing comes back, what do they do next?
I mean, so sometimes it's just about continuing to focus on the music. Sometimes maybe it's like, hey, focus on the music. Maybe the media story's not there yet, right? And then maybe it is what I just said. Hey, maybe I should just be in some of these rooms where I know reporters are going to be at, or whatever the case may be, and just try to see if I can meet them organically where it presents itself and just try to build a rapport there. You know what I mean? Part of even as a publicist, I tell my team a lot, like, hey, make sure when you're at these events, at these red carpets, whatever, you chatting it up with reporters as well, because this, like anything, this is a relationship game. You're not just like, hey, I'm walking, Meg Thee Stallion on the carpet, right? It's like, no, while I'm there, I'm not just walking Neo on a red carpet. Hey, I'm chatting with, the media outlet. You know what I mean? Like, I'm chatting with, excuse me, with USA Today or GQ or whatever the case may be, or Forbes, whatever the case, whomever is at that event or that carpet, so that you can build that organic relationship, so that they can get to know you as a human, so that way when your email hits their inbox, it doesn't just feel like another email. It's like, oh yeah, I know that person. Yeah, let me check out. Let me see what they got.
Yo, how does that red carpet work? How do you navigate that?
In what sense?
Just the whole thing. I mean, like, because I see, obviously, like, you'll go and you'll take the artist on the red carpet, but then, you got to have the credential in order to get on the red carpet with your artist. And then you go and you talk to the outlets to see who wants to have the conversation with the artist. Are you having those conversations with the journalist prior to, or are you doing it on the red carpet? Like, what's the significance of the red carpet? There's so much that goes into that. I was just curious.
Great question. I always like to be over prepared. So if whenever the red carpet officially opens, I like to be there like 30, 45 minutes beforehand. So as the media outlets are setting up on the carpet, I see who's there. I see where they're stationed at. If it's people I know, and even if it's people I don't know, I introduce myself. Hey, so-and-so, I'm here with XYZ clients. They're doing, so-and-so's presenting, so-and-so's nominated for this. So-and-so just coming, but, I tell them a little bit, I kind of like give them a quick little 20-second pitch in person, saying like, hey, want to chat with my client, right? So it's about the pre-preparation. Like, not enough people, some people just go up to the carpet and kind of like just try their luck and like, let's see, like I try to get there early and try to do the pre-preparation. So I already kind of go into the carpet with a plan. Now, sometimes that plan is going to get completely thrown out the window when it's the carpet is full and that outlet is already talking to like two other people and the other one is talking to a couple people. So you can come in with a plan and then you have to make split decisions into like, damn, I got to make these adjustments really quick, or maybe I should go to this one, or I should go here and then bring this person back a little bit. So there's a lot of pre-preparation that goes into that as well. Sometimes where like if the client is speaking to somebody now and I want them to speak to the next person, but if they don't wrap this one quick, the one next to them is going to interview somebody else. I tell the outlet like, hey, last question. We got to do the last question, then we got to go.
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? And then that way I can bring them so that we can continue to have a good cadence of interviews. So it's, again, that's where the unspoken body language part comes into play sometimes, or it can be like a simple tap, a simple signal, sometimes just a little look like they know like, oh,
the journalist
wants to wrap. Or to your client as well. Sometimes to your client as well. Where it's just like, hey, or like even when like if it's Fat Joe, a quick little like tap to the back, like he'll know, okay, like let's wrap this. Wrap this up. So
got you.
You know what I mean? So it's like it's the unspoken nuances with the reporting. Again, that's why it comes down to relationships. If it's a reporter you know really well, cool. They'll help you out. They'll know what time it is. Your client will trust you, whatever. And sometimes, again, and you won't always have that benefit. Sometimes it'll be new people as well. So sometimes you just have to be like, hey, gotta wrap it up. Like,
you know what I also always found fascinating on those red carpets is when it's the photo, the photo op there, and you got the 20 photographers just flashing away.
Yeah.
Those motherfuckers would just be yelling all kinds of shit and be like, look here, smile, give me a smile, give me. And it's like, well, yo, how do you have this liberty to say all that shit? But it's almost like those photographers have ownership of that moment.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do like more artists not tell them like, hey man, chill the fuck out. If I don't want to smile, I'm not going to smile in this moment. But you know, I guess it's like a game being, I don't know. It just seems it seems like such an interesting dynamic every time I see it.
It is. I think sometimes it's a projection of the photographer's stress, projecting that out because they're trying to get the perfect photo for the, you know, for their outlet or whatever.
Yeah.
But that doesn't justify their actions, how they talk sometimes, right? So obviously sometimes I do appreciate like when an artist like books back a little bit. But it's also like, again, looking at the psychology of it. I just give you psychology. Maybe this one is stressed, you know, or maybe this artist is just kind of like not in the best headspace and just trying to like get the job done, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's just trying to approach everything with empathy and understanding. And sometimes you're not going to get that. And sometimes a photographer needs to be put in their place for saying some foul, crazy shit.
Yeah.
But then sometimes, you know what I mean? Sometimes also the talent may not know better, especially if it's younger talent, they may not know better. And it's like, oh, okay, you walk me through the pose of what you want, and then that probably lends itself to the better picture. So it doesn't always come from malicious intent either,
Of course,
right?
of course.
So
I've noticed that too.
Right.
Like, so there's just a lot of energy happening in that exchange of like 10 seconds. There's so much going on right there. So you're preparing the new artist as well. Like, hey, this is what it's going to look like.
Of course.
With the photography. This is how, you know, that moment. And then when it goes to the interview, you're doing
of
the
course.
preparation with the
No, you
clients.
absolutely try to prep them. When it comes to the photos, you know what I mean? That is also sometimes they develop relationships with photographers over the years that they know if so-and-so's like saying something, they know, okay, he's just trying to get the best pose out of me. Or if it's a random stranger, it's like, so we just kind of try to prepare them for, you know, you never know what you're going to encounter, but at least walking them through why something may be happening. Like, hey, like, don't let nobody talk to you crazy, you know, but at the same time, hey, maybe it's just because to get a better angle of you to get the best shot, right? But it's ultimately on the client to decide what they want to do. What's their level of comfortability? You know, it's always making sure the client is comfortable, you know, making sure client first.
Yo, understanding as well, I think you have several A-list artists, comedians, those in the entertainment space, politics. Everybody's level of success looks different. I'm curious from your perspective, do you also find success in the artist that you have that doesn't do everything, that does like just very specific moments?
I think the strategy is predicated on the artist and where they're at. There's going to be some artists where they don't need to do everything. You reach a certain caliber, you don't need to do everything. And sometimes
how do you identify that though? That moment when you've reached that, like, I ain't doing nothing. We run into that all, like, not all the time, but like some artists are in that space right now, right? Yeah.
Well, I think, again, it's being methodical of what that individual has, you know, going for them, right? And it's just figuring out, like, you know, whether it's a Megan or a Druski, where it's like, you know, again, and knowing people's personalities, where like, you know, like they want to be very intentional and thoughtful of what they want. And on the flip side, when you know you're kind of at a certain echelon, is also being very strategic on the PR side. But again, it's knowing your clients and knowing, for some, again, it's quality versus quantity, right? And whereas with some, their goals may be a little more different, where it's just like, hey, like, I don't mind doing, you know, things with frequency because I'm trying to get my message out in front of as many people as possible. So the strategy can change depending on what you're trying to promote it. Like if so-and-so has a show in New York and, you know, is not selling well or whatever, you may have to go do, you know, all the local media, you know, and just to try to get it in front of them. Or you have a, you know, I don't know, you have a movie premiere or something like that. Like, you may want to do all the press on the carpet, you know what I mean? Just to continue to generate awareness for it. So it's very situational. It's not, you know, black and white by any case, you know. Maybe I think that's the one where there's just a lot of nuance and figuring out what's my immediate goal in this particular situation, right? Like, it's like, oh, if you know, if Druski's having a premiere event for, you know, Could Have Been Love, right? And we're inviting press, you know, the press that are going to be there, and we're doing like a carpet or something. I mean, the goal would be, hey, it's your event. You're going to want to talk to as many press as possible because it's your event and they're coming to you, right? So whereas where maybe if he was going to somebody else's event and he was just, you know, it was a film that he's playing a part of, but it's not his thing, but he still wants to promote it. Okay, maybe let's be a little strategic. Let's do like 3 to 5, you know, different media outlets on this carpet. We don't need to do all 15.
Smart, yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you both identify which one.
Everything is very situational. So
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of figuring that part out.
Can you walk me through potentially where you put, like, you broke something, you know, in a non-traditional way? So, like, say, for example, like, maybe there's a conversation with you and Druski. I'm just using an example. I don't know. But it's just like, hey, I think at this moment in time, we should talk about that I'm going to go hit the road and tour. Do you guys talk about, like, where you're going to position that, how you're going to position that?
Yeah, I think I do that with every client. I think that's very important. It's like, okay, you want to come into an interview with a goal, with an objective of what's the message you want to get out, right?
Yeah.
And in many cases, like, why are we doing the interview in the first place, right? And then again, it's like, okay, aligning on some talking points. What do we want? Because again, what I like to do, have my team do, is send whoever's interviewing our client talking points of what's been going on with them and what they're promoting. So essentially, I'm serving you the information in a silver platter to ask that individual the question so we can get the appropriate messaging out, right? And obviously the interviewer is going to have their own array of questions in that as well, but at least I'm giving you the information so that way I'm saving the reporter some of the steps of doing the research, because I'm giving it to you already to help them, but I'm giving it to you so I can also guide you to ask some of the questions that I know my clients are going to want to talk about.
How do you identify a great publicist?
Great question. I mean, there's a lot of facets to publicity, right? There's some great publicists who are great with media, maybe not as great with clients and client management, but they're great at securing placements. There are some who'll be great with client management who maybe don't have as strong media relation skills. There are some that, you know, are really good at the writing part of it and like writing press releases and doing whatever, but they're not good at presenting. So I think it's meeting the person where they're at and seeing where the opportunities are for growth and working with them on their weaknesses, you know what I mean? And also leaning into their strengths, right? That's how I like to kind of manage my team, right? Is like, you know, and even for me, you know, there's been people who had, you know, seen opportunities. I mean, seeing the strengths I've had, seeing the weaknesses, and we work on the weaknesses. So I usually, when I'm interviewing candidates and I'm trying to see who I think could be a good fit, is identifying, okay, what are the strengths? What does that fit into where, as an agency, where our weaknesses are, where our strengths are, and how do you fit that puzzle piece here, right? So it's like, because if we're already strong in one area and this candidate is strong in that same area, may not be the best fit to hire and just continue to overload what we're strong at. I may want to find somebody that's stronger in a place we're a little weaker at, so we can fill that puzzle piece here and be more well-rounded. So it's just kind of, you know, I think that's managing anybody's, meeting people where they're at, identifying, you know, what their strengths and weaknesses are. When you identify the weaknesses, working on a plan to, you know, make sure you invest in them and see and put them in rooms so they can study you, or have them on calls to study you, but then giving them the platform to be able to work on it, so that if, hey, maybe you're not the strongest public speaker, maybe instead of having you run this call, maybe let's have you run maybe like these 2 points in this agenda, in this conversation with this client, so you can build your confidence and deliver these 2 points right, to that once you've done it with regularity, that you've crushed these 2 points, then maybe I can have you speak a little bit more. Maybe now you're speaking about 5 parts, and then, you know, now you're talking halfway through the call, and then before you know it, you just leading the call, you didn't even know it. Right. So it just,
building
you know,
confidence.
Of course, everything is repetition. Life is about repetition. So it's just like,
is the mother of all learning.
Indeed. So it's just like, it's giving people opportunity to get more reps in where you can on things that they can sharpen up their skills at. So
what would you say is your biggest strength as a publicist?
My biggest strength as a publicist?
Yeah.
I'll probably say communication, active listening, reading the room.
Yeah.
I just think all those things in one. I think that they all go hand in hand. But it's just being able to just like read the room and adjust, and hey, maybe this isn't the time to present something to a client. This isn't the time to present something to a media outlet, you know, figuring that out.
Are you looking at...
And selling stories, by the way, I say, because even as a journalist...
Your biggest strength, selling stories?
Even that too. Because again, as a reporter, I will pitch... I'm gonna give an example. I think this is a good example just for your audience. So when I was an intern at the Miami Herald, right? LeBron James had just come to Miami. It was Miami Media Day. It's LeBron and Chris Bosh, right? So everybody's like, LeBron, Chris Bosh. Yeah, exactly. So all the media is writing stories about them, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, I'm an intern here. I want to stand out. But I'm like, everybody's zigging and going for like the LeBron, D-Wade, Chris Bosh aspect of it. Then I saw Juwan Howard, right? Juwan Howard was brought, end of the bench veteran. And I'm like, shit. I'm like, And I think I had just finished watching something about the Fab Five, and I was like, shit, this may be, if Juwan Howard wins a ring, he'd probably be the first of the Fab Five to actually win a ring. So that prompted an idea. So I just interviewed Juwan, because it's media day anyway, just getting some quotes, just like how much it would mean to him, whatever. And I already got the quotes. So then I pitched it to my editor, and I'm like, what do you think? Like, here's the vision of like, hey, he can finally bring. And then I had also I had interviewed Juwan. I'm like, I have Juwan, and I already have some ideas for secondary sources, because Chris Webber was a TNT analyst. So I'm like, I could probably reach out to TNT PR, speak to him. Jalen Rose, ESPN commentator, I could reach out to ESPN's PR team. And then they loved the idea. And then I got quotes from Jalen, got quotes from Chris, and then turned it in a big feature story that it ended up making the Miami Heat preseason special section, which for me as an intern, like that was huge, right? Yeah. But then that goes back into taking that concept now from a PR perspective. It's like, okay, people are getting overloaded with being told the same story, focusing this. What's the other story? What's the thing that people are not really paying attention to that maybe you can find a way to pitch, and I can go to media outlet X and be like, hey, talking about, Megan's entrepreneurial career, like, getting her on the cover of Forbes, and having her be the first Black woman to be on the cover of the Under 30 issue was momentous moment for me. Yeah. Getting Yo Gotti on a Forbes cover as well. Getting, Druski on this Billboard cover, getting Fat Joe on like a XXL cover for it was like the 30-year anniversary of him being in the music game. Things like that. Matter of fact, the other thing, these two are very, whole special places in my heart also is, I reached out to the mayor of Oakland to get Too Short to have a street renamed after him. It was a cold email. Yeah. And then I did the same thing a year later to the mayor of Vallejo, California for E40. And I was just that it was a cold email, and I outlined what they've done for not only their music careers but also what they've done for the community.
Are you telling the artist before you reach out to the city, or not? You reach out to the city first?
No, I reach out to the city because I don't want to. Because sometimes you don't want to oversell, overpromise, because then you put this idea in their mind. Here's what I'll say. It was a little different. Shout out to Short and E40, but once E40 saw that I got Too Short, the street renaming in 2022, he's like, he hit me. He's like, you know what this means, right? He's like, Vallejo needs to have a street renamed after me. So he put the pressure on me off the rip in a good way. You know what I mean? And I was like, all right, bro, I'm gonna deliver. You know what I mean? I told him I'll do my best. Because I don't like to overpromise, but I did deliver. A year later, we were standing there. We had a street renamed after him. We got both of them. It was street renamings, a key to the city, and respective proclamations for Too Short Day in Oakland and E40 Day in Vallejo, California.
And you just cold called the city on both of them?
Both.
What are you saying?
Literally what I said. It was like outlining why I thought it was a perfect time for them, like for Short.
And who the fuck are you reaching out to at the city?
I mean, the good thing about politicians is a lot of that information is public, so you got to just dig and do your research.
Oh shit! Okay.
On the website, so obviously, like who from the mayor's team is the right person to go to. So I had reached out to to them on Short and just like, hey, here's this anniversary we're celebrating. Here's what he's done. In case you don't know to the extent of how much he's done and why this is powerful, right? And then also why the time is right now, what he's done in the community. Just a reminder, you know what I mean? And just making sure that they get their flowers. So I got Neo, the key to the city of Las Vegas. He was raised in Las Vegas. Okay. And that was also just special too. It's also making sure that, that our legends are getting the love. And it just, again, comes down to that same approach, bringing it back to when I was covering the Miami Heat and I saw that opportunity for Juwan. It's like, hey, how do I brainstorm and think of something different than the traditional way? And just even with like those examples with like Short, 40 and Neo just reaching out to the man like, yo, these guys are legends. They're celebrating anniversaries. They need to get their flowers too. Let's think of something big. And then once we got that, we turned them into like massive events. So
wow, that's impressive.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Would you say that that's, if you're trying to become a publicist in today's day and age, what is some of the things that they can be doing in order to be recognized by some of the great PR firms like yours?
So if
somebody's trying to become a publicist today, right? what are some of the things that they can be doing to be recognized by a great PR firm like yours and potentially get hired?
Yeah.
And I know you said you're covering up for weaknesses or strengths, you know what I mean? But like, what else is there outside of that? Because they don't, somebody who's trying to become a publicist has no control of what your company's looking for.
Of course. No, for sure. But I think right now just putting in the work. Sometimes it's like, I like to ask when I'm interviewing people like, hey, why are you interested in PR? Why are you interested in entertainment PR? Because I really want to get to the bottom of the answer. You just trying to, be in the room, be cloudy, so you try to put in this work.
True.
Because I want people that are hustlers and putting in this work. That one thing about my team, everyone that works on our team, they put in the work.
Trust me.
They put in the work. Like that, you know what I mean? Like, and if there's anybody who hasn't, and you learn, they get weeded out really quickly. Where if I can tell, like you're in this for the wrong reasons, like you're not gonna be at our company for that long.
So what does the work look like though before they get to you?
Yeah, so the work before that, obviously, just like everyone has their own experiences, whether they've been at other agencies, other labels, and it's really just it's the work they've accomplished. But again, how do they function within a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think just for anyone coming out of like college, obviously, is making sure, hey, you get some strong internships under your belt. If you didn't have any internships, what did you do on campus? You know what I mean? Were you part of your local chapter? How were you trying to do that? Like I was speaking at my alma mater a couple months back, and someone was like, oh yeah, there's this local, Syracuse artist that I just, connected with him, and I'm just trying to help him, get him some like local looks, and like I bring him to New York City to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, yo, that's dope. For someone that's like, hey, I don't have an internship right now, but let me be proactive. I linked with this person and I'm just trying to hit these blogs, whatever. Like that's just still shows a hustler's mentality and hustler's spirit.
Yeah.
And those are the things I look for too, because that's also outside the box. And it's like, hey, I'm just going to try to figure things out, with whatever resources I got by any means necessary. So it's looking for that, creative thinking, is looking for just a hustler attitude, because that's the biggest thing. It's like, if you have the work ethic is half the battle. Everything else from there, we can work on coaching and tailoring. But,
Are you looking at PR, your PR firm, and potentially in the future looking to figure out how you can become more integrated in the media side of things, kind of like a content studio as well?
I've started to just think about, what are other directions we can go. Obviously, I don't even call like our PR firm just a PR firm anymore. I think we're also a marketing firm. We really do, because we do a lot more than just PR.
So intertwined.
Because it's like we get our clients who perform national anthems at, big events like, at, the NBA Cup, the US Open, MLS All-Star Game, MLB All-Star, etc. Right? So it's like that, can be PRs, can be marketing. Even some of these digital marketing platforms now on TikTok and IG, like the lines are blurred, because for like labels, that would fall under like digital marketing. Whereas agency, I'm like, nah, that's PR. Like that for us, that's PR. All this shit is PR.
Yeah.
So I think that goes into why I called it, Vital Versatility, is because it was just like, hey, we're not just strong in just music and entertainment. We can do sports, we can do business, we can do criminal justice, X, Y, Z. But then that lends itself deeper into the messaging of like, we don't just do legacy media. We do, new forms of media. We do streamers. We can be adaptable, depending on what the circumstances are.
Yeah. Where do you see in 2026? Where do you see this new forms of media going?
I think streaming is going to continue blowing up. Like you already see it with Complex, where like Complex as a media outlet, or like the Breakfast Club or TMZ, where now they have Twitch accounts where they're streaming. I think you're going to start seeing a lot more of that with media publication. I think pretty soon, like I'd be stunned if by the end of 2026, you're not seeing like CNN and ABC having their own like live streams. Yeah, but like, I think you have to do that in order to reach a younger demographic. You have to be able to evolve, right? And just in many ways, that's how some of the younger generation is consuming their news. They're like, how do you make more of an adaptable approach and make your social media channels more digestible, to disseminate news for that generation that is consuming it? Because now some of these outlets, they've approached media from such a traditional perspective for the longest. They are now being forced to evolve.
They have to,
right?
Because the advertising spend is going in a different direction.
Correct. Yeah. So that's really what that's one of the big things I, continue to see. I also think the emergence of independent journalists. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like where before you had to be part of a media outlet to be, seen as an authority in breaking news. But now there's freelance reporters who are like focusing on just celebrity entertainment legal stuff, you know what I mean? Who are just
Super niche.
Who are turning, niche, who are turning into authority. Sports reporters who are just like building a Substack and literally breaking news through their Substack. And like they're doing their own avenues. And I think the prevalence of independent journalists, where then you're going to be able to make money on your own platforms and turn your own platform into a news-making vehicle, a news-breaking vehicle, I think that's going to be very, very, like that's something that, in the PR space is like, it's not just looking at the reporters who are at these outlets. It's like, like we need to also identify independent journalists that, are authorities and that still have their own platforms, a Substack, or it can be their Instagram account, whatever the case may be, or it could be their TikTok account, where they may just be a talking head about a particular subject matter and integrate them as well, because we're in such a video era now where it's like, hey, like all it takes is like, you may have, 20,000 followers, but if I bring you to this red carpet, you interview so-and-so, that's going to make the algorithm go crazy, that video content from, my event, my carpet is going to be, put in front of a bunch of people. So just being more thoughtful about approaching independent journalists as well. And like, it has to be part of the strategy, because especially with like, AI, coming into the mix now, like that's changing the game for media as a whole. So it's like, I think that's even on the legal side, there's going to be more and just kind of in the legal space, because AI has already been muddying the waters, but it's really going to muddy the waters. And I think going back to just, advice, just not being, don't use AI, Chat GPT as a crutch. You know what I mean? Like, when I did tech PR, I did one of my classes is IBM. So I learned about the AI machine learning system like a long time ago. And one of the things that they always talked about, which still resonates to this day for me, is like, use AI to help you, but don't expect it to like replace a bunch of things. Like it can help you formulate ideas and supplement some of your ideas, right? So I think that's just one of those things where like, I think we just also have to be careful both from a media perspective and journalists being too dependent on AI, but then also, publicists being too dependent on AI as well. Because again, at the end of the day, we have to be accurate with our information. We have to, offer journalists accurate information. Journalists have to report accurate information. So I think now more than ever, there's going to be a microscope on like, hey, how is this dynamic working? How is AI going to really change the game, and how, holding people accountable? And then on the flip side, with AI and with some of the entertainers in the town we represent, is like, hey, how is that going to, infiltrate their careers, and what are some benefits and what are some challenges that's going to cause, and being ready to play both positions, in the PR space.
Can you speak on an example or two that you've seen where you've identified where you got to navigate?
Well, no, I mean, even just when it comes to just, AI songs, and how they're being created, I think someone who been very vocal is Neo. Neo's a songwriter and obviously an artist. And now you're seeing AI that
What's his stance?
He's very anti-AI, because he's like, it's not, his position is that AI is not creative. It's copying my creativity. You know what I mean? And at the end of the day, it's like, you're not, some of these hit songs are born from a place of emotion, of storytelling. And it's just a copycat, where you're not going to get that same level of emotion that's going to resonate with the audience. So I think, that's something that he's been very vocal about and has really, really strong positions. We had him on CNN about a year ago, and it was a really fascinating 13-minute discussion just live on air, just talking about AI that, I would encourage a lot of people to just check out. But I just really think, it's being very mindful of how, AI is going to impact entertainment as a whole. And I think, for media and PR, there's going to be some challenges, there's going to be some benefits, but I think that's just part of life. It's just like anything. The introduction of the internet came from challenges and benefits. You evolve, you adapt, and you keep it moving.
How do you navigate, because you have several clients? I would assume that, as is life, not everybody's going to agree on certain topics. And so how do you comfortably navigate that as somebody who's representing these individuals who might have polar opposite stance on them, but they're coming in the same, the PR is your agency, as an example, but it's like very different opinions. Does that ever get any murky?
I don't really think so, right? I think everyone's entitled to their opinions. If someone feels one way about AI or whatever the case may be. I'm just using that as an example.
Let's use that. Like somebody is like anti, somebody else is like very pro.
But it can even just be like, political, whatever. Like at the end of the day, they're their own entities. I think as long as it's nothing that is malicious, nothing that is attacking the character of other people, you know what I mean? Like obviously there's a line where if this is where it's like it's putting the artist in jeopardy, putting different things in jeopardy that I need to be cognizant of, then that's something where you have to reevaluate. But I think at the end of the day is also like we're all human beings. We all have opinions, but being smart to make sure that it's not anything that's going to be, super,
detrimental to like devastating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
if you disagree with an opinion of a client on something, well, even before you take, do you have to align with their opinions of how they go about?
No, everyone has their own opinion. That happens plenty of times, but I give them the pros and cons to the situation. Hey, if you move forward with this, I just want to say this or whatever, here's the benefit, here's what could happen, but you can also get this blowback. I'll give you, again, I'm going to give you my recommendation. I keep coming back to that because, again, I'll give you my recommendation on what I think you should do. Sometimes clients take it, some don't. But I'm still doing my job by giving you the recommendation and at least allowing you to see both sides of the spectrum. Then with the information you have, you make that decision. I'm not going to impose my perspective on something. I'm just going to give it to you. You're asking me for a recommendation on how to approach it, I'll tell you. But otherwise, it's like, you have your opinion. I'm just going to let you know, hey, maybe do you want to say it? Do you not want to say it? How do you want to deliver it? Do you want to do it in a podcast interview? Do you want to do it as a statement? Whatever the case may be. So we're just offering the individual options.
Yeah.
And again, giving them as much information as possible to empower them to make the best decision possible, to how they want to articulate a specific message.
Man, I think, dude, it's amazing to see how you think through these problems, how you communicate through these problems, and it's no wonder why you're so incredibly successful in just only 4 years in this business. So it's going to be, I'm very excited to see where you take this.
I appreciate it. 4 years in this entrepreneurial business, crazy, but it's been a blessing. It's obviously like anything, it comes with its high points, its low points, but when it gets high, I don't get too high. When things get low, I don't get too low. It's just one of those things where you keep things even keel and just keep chipping away because there's work to be done. The moment you get complacent is the moment where, shit happens.
That's what starts to fall apart. Yeah.
So right now, I just continue just to do the work, control the things I can control and keep an even-keeled approach and make sure you're also building your team in that respect to approach the work and the business in a similar manner.
It's also dope to see because, there's not a lot of Latino representation and a fellow Colombian as well.
Yeah, man.
To doing it at a high level. I love to see it, man.
Absolutely.
One of us making it shake in this business. It's great, man.
Of course. No, yeah. And that's even just been helpful. We've been working in the Latin space too recently, started working with Ozuna. And,
congrats.
Been wanting, obviously that's one of the things we've been wanting to do more in the Latin space. And I think, that's exactly that, just being able to also provide that and help them break into the general market space or penetrate new, one cool thing we did with Ozuna is we had him, he introduced Game 1 of the World Series on Fox. And it's something that, hadn't done. He was like the intro, did the whole package.
I was watching the Canadian broadcast.
That's right. That's how could I forget?
Please, man. Buck Martinez.
Yes,
bro.
Of course.
Yeah.
But either which way, there's a lot of just a lot of excitement there. And again, it goes back to why I called it Vital Versatility. We want to touch as many. We don't just do hip hop. We have several country artists. Mickey Guyton, Breland. Obviously, Neil's been pivoting into the country space as well.
Yeah.
Been doing things in the Latin space, and we don't want to be, and we did not just wanting to be pigeonholed music. We do restaurants.
Yep.
We do Say Less. We work with entrepreneurs as well as Carolyn Aronson, the founder and CEO of It's a 10 Hair Care.
What's it like working with her?
Phenomenal. She's really, again, I soak up all the opportunities I can to be able to really like learn from her, learn from them. And again, that's another way where we take a multi-pronged approach. We had her do an interview with Bloomberg, and then we had her do an interview with James from School of Hard Knocks, from the IG TikTok platform.
So smart.
And it's just like, because for them, like, they've seen it from afar, but there's just like, no, this is going to be big. And even just the metrics, I think after maybe 24 hours, 36 hours after she did that interview and it went live, she got like 15,000 followers on Instagram.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just, I love those challenges of telling different stories.
What's one thing that you learned from her? But, as another very successful entrepreneur, if you could impart any wisdom.
No, for sure. I mean, I think obviously with what we do in our business, there's a lot of sacrifice with what we do, right?
Yeah.
A lot of, when your personal life, friends and family, and just, Carolyn has such a phenomenal story, whereas that she's a self-made billionaire Latina that, she started off as a hairdresser at like age, 14, 15, opened up her first hair salon at age 30, opened up a company in her mid-30s that then crashed and burned, lost everything. And, most people would have been like, damn, it's a failure. I'm done taking calculated risks. But she decided to then start It's a 10 Hair Care. And then, 20 years later, it has a multi-billion-dollar worth valuation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just not only with that, but then she did that, predominantly as a single mother, like building that in those first, like five to 10 years. And I just think she'd tell us stories about how like some of her employees would also help keep an eye on like her kid as well, like growing up. And it was just like, it was very beautiful to see just how she was able to build this empire. How she didn't give up after the first failure from her first company, that she continued to, move forward and continue to take the calculated risk to start again, to be able to do it, predominantly as a single mother, and then build it into such a powerhouse force. And obviously now working with Carolyn and her husband, Jeff, who's obviously another just, marketing guru. And, it's just been really a pleasure to learn from both of them.
Amazing. Didier, man, I shout out to Cello, by the way, who introduced us years ago.
Absolutely.
Man. My guy, Cello, my guy.
Yeah,
and
Cello. Michael Ortiz, absolutely.
Ortiz
Shout out
Michael
to
be running marathons all the
Yo,
time.
for real, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
so.
Man. But listen, I really appreciate your time over here. I think you gave a lot of game. One last question, actually, I do have for you. Do you work with baby artists?
No, I mean, we do. So obviously, like, we also handle some labels. Like, we handle Rock Nation's record label, Yo Gotti's record label, CMG.
Okay.
So he's, like, Gotti has some younger artists, like, Zillionaire Doe, Big Boogie, some of those. And obviously, Rock Nation, like the Marco Pluses and, Rubin Vincent's and et cetera. So, yes, obviously, our team works, really diligently with them and helping, elevate their stories. And sometimes for younger artists, sometimes it just starts off as like, hey, may not be an interview, but like, hey, can you at least meet with the editor of Billboard or editor at Complex, right? And just starting kind of building the building blocks. Can I play some music for you, right? And at least start the relationship that way. Smart. And I think the beauty of now where we're at with with digital content creation is really, shout out, Gabe, for what he created with On the Radar, which is originally started for just younger baby artists, that now there are other ones that are kind of copying that blueprint a little bit and making it in their own unique way, so that there's more platforms that help give younger artists other opportunities to break as well and show off their skills, freestyle, whatever the case may be. And I think that's also the beauty of being in this specific digital age, that there's more opportunities for some of these younger artists that predominantly would not have had those opportunities, in the past.
I say that all the time when it comes to the older generation of rappers, how they're also carving out this niche and doing these podcasts. When it comes to Joe, obviously Joe Budden was the person who was really like the forefather of all of this. And then you have Nori, but now you got Jim Jones, you got Mano, you got so many of these guys that are doing it and like creating more opportunities. Like I love it. I love to see all that. And On the Radar, some more specific music avenues or platforms that people can go to. It's amazing to see it in this day and age.
Absolutely. No, it's a beauty. We've, watching just Joe continue to crush it on Joe and Jada, like the success is no surprise, because again, he can speak to, you're not just speaking to musicians, right? He can speak to athletes. You have having Carl Anthony Towns on, having Allen Iverson on. You want to have Hollywood on, we have Jesse Williams on, At some point, from a political perspective, Joe can speak, to politicians, if he wanted to, right? Because I've seen him, he showed his ability to do it in the past. But I just think, whatever way they want to take it, the way him and Jadakiss really complement each other has been 100%. Phenomenal.
I'm a firm believer that Joe knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing in his presentation and how he communicates and how he gets the engagement going. I think he's incredibly smart. I think you have incredible clients. I think you're incredibly smart, very sharp. Thank you so much for doing this podcast, man. And I just can't wait to see what you do in the next 5 or 10 years, brother.
Thank you. And just let me give you your flowers on my way out. But congratulations to you and what you've been building and this platform and giving a voice to so many, not only who are in the front lines, but who are also behind the scenes. Because either which way, this is one very tight-knit community. It's a small community. And I just think just the game that's being dropped on a regular basis, there's really a white space for this conversation. And I'm proud of what you've built, and I know you're going to continue to build it to a new level.
Thank you. You know, I need a publicist.
You already know the vibe, my brother. You already know.
Appreciate you, brother.
Love, brother. Love.